Chapter 1129. A total of 150,000 soldiers charged forward like a long dragon, chasing after the five-star army. Could be said that they were invincible. They did not even need Maori regularization to do anything as they continued to advance. Along the way they could see the corpses of the five-star army soldiers lying on the ground. Unfortunately, most of them were from the Japanese Empire. Although Maori regularization could not bear to see them die, he knew that these people had betrayed them and deserved to die. After thinking about killing all of the Sensei Naganabu's men, it should be the Han people next. He could not help but become excited. The night passed by as they chased each other. By the time the next day dawned, they had already traveled 30 to 40 kilometers. When the sun rose and shone on their bodies, they felt a warm feeling. Fatigue also surged through their bodies. Reporting to General, the scouts at the front have sent news that General Fukada Tani's army has disappeared. Just as Mao Li was lazily stretching his back on his horse, a personal guard walked over and said something that made him turn pale with fright. Disappeared? Could it be that they ran too fast and lost track of them? Maori regularization felt that something was wrong, but he did not think of the worst possibility. We didn't lose them, but they deliberately hid. General, we are surrounded by tall mountains. If someone wants to hide, it won't be easy to find them. The bodyguard didn't dare to speak nonsense without evidence, but he still had the ability to remind the general. They deliberately hid? How is that possible? Mao Lijing still had a look of disbelief on his face, but soon his eyes widened. Clearly he had thought of a possibility. He suddenly shouted, pass down the order, stop advancing and retreat immediately. If Fukada Tani deliberately disappeared, then there was a big problem. The worst and most likely result was that he did not intend to help the general at all. On the contrary, he did all this to lure them into a trap. Maori regularization came to a realization, but it was too late. Because just as he ordered the army to stop, and before the order had even reached the ears of the 50,000 soldiers, deafening battle cries suddenly came from the surrounding mountains. Then, countless bright-colored five-star army soldiers covered the sky and covered the earth. It was as if a large blanket was about to wrap them up completely. When the battle cries sounded, Maori regularization's expression became very bad. He did not think that the worst result would happen. Speaking of his previous impression of Fukada Tani, whether it was Maori regularization or Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, they did not completely trust him. According to the previous plan, they would only attack when the five-star army was defeated. But the strange thing was that the beginning of the battle was too smooth. Fukada Tani actually burned down the granary, and there were so many Japanese army corpses on the ground. Maori regularization also carefully looked at the corpses and found that the people on the ground had indeed died not long ago. It was all of this that dispelled all of Maori regularization's worries. Now that he thought about it, he was still too anxious. Even if Fukada Tani really fought with them against the five-star army with his strength, how could he do all of this so easily? It was completely because he was forced too hard. Now that he finally saw the light of hope, he threw himself into it without caring about anything else. There's no need to retreat. Tell everyone to shrink the formation and resist as much as possible. As long as we can hold on for a while, the Supreme General will definitely send troops to save us. Maori regularization was worthy of being a commander for many years. When he saw the qualitative change in the situation, he immediately changed the battlefield strategy. However, facing the five-star army that had been prepared for a long time, even if Maori regularization's orders were accurate, once they reached here, everything would be over. 5 foreign divisions, plus more than 100,000 Japanese army led by Fukada Tani and Sensei Naganabu, a total of more than 200,000 people. And this was after they were prepared to deal with only 50,000 Maori regularization. There was no suspense at all about the result. The fierce battle began. Countless soldiers of the five-star army rushed towards the Japanese army that was surrounded. The sound of swords clashing could be heard endlessly. Under the great momentum, after resisting for less than an hour, the Japanese army's defensive formation began to show various loopholes. Gradually, the Japanese army began to surrender and kneel on the ground. The outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Not far from the center of the battlefield, Sensei Naganabu looked at Fukada Tani, who was also riding a tall horse, with a trace of envy and said, Kun Fukada, this time you have made a great contribution. Bugnam of Gojoseon will definitely record it down. Ah, Meiji-kun, I'll take your blessings. In fact, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already promised me the benefits I need. I'm very satisfied. When Fukata Tani said this, there was an unconcealable excitement on his face. Yes, the reason why the Maori regularization was surrounded was all because of Fukata Tani's betrayal. Ever since the Maori regularization appeared in front of him and spoke sincerely, Fukata Tani was not moved at all. However, he still pretended to accept everything in order to make a great contribution. Just like when the Maori regularization left, Fukata Tani went to find the 7th Army's commander Tian Su and the 1st Reserve Division's commander Su Kuda, and told them everything that had just happened. Fukata Tani's IQ was not low at all. He was chosen by Ashikaga Yoshimasa to stay in Ping and Beijing. He clearly understood the situation. The so-called Supreme General of the Japanese Empire was nothing more than a grasshopper after autumn. He would not be able to jump around for more than a few days. Not to mention with what he had done, it would be strange if Ashikaga Yoshimasa would forgive him. The position of Supreme General? Only a fool would believe it so easily. Cooperating with such a person was simply courting death. Take advantage of your weakness to take your life. At this juncture, the most important thing was to find a way to step on him and maximize the benefits. In order to ensure that his rights and interests were not lost, Fukata Tani took the initiative to find Tian Su and Su Kuda to report his work. From this point alone, it could be seen that he was very cautious. It was as if he was afraid that if he only went to find one of the commanders, the matter would be leaked and he would lose the credit. Fukata Tani underestimated Tian Su and Su Kuda. The former was the commander of Lung Feng Lu and had a limitless future. The latter was the commander of the 1st Reserve Division and was in charge of 30,000 veterans. His future was also unpredictable. How could these two people steal Fukata Tani's credit? Therefore, this news was quickly sent to Yang Qindong in Ping and Beijing in the form of a telegram. Not long after, a telegram came back. First, he praised Fukata Tani's loyalty. Then he stated that the 500,000 taels of benefits given by Ashikaga Yoshimasa were all for Fukata Tani's personal use. Not only that, once the Japanese Empire became a province of Xianxia, if he wanted he could stay in the Japanese Empire and become a true supreme general. This was Yang Qindong's breadth of mind. His vision had never been limited to a city or a place. His goal was the entire world. A small Japanese empire was nothing to him. Not to mention, when the Japanese Empire became a province in the future, it was necessary to have a local supreme general. Only then could they avoid more internal friction. Fukata Tani's ability to lead troops into battle was average, but he was smart enough to see the situation clearly. Yang Qindong was very relieved to have someone like him manage the military of the Japanese Empire in the future. After Tian Su and Su Kuda read the telegram, it was sent to Fukata Tani. He was extremely excited and repeatedly said that he would fully cooperate with the 5-Star Army's military operation and fight a beautiful battle for the world to see. Tian Su and Su Kuda, who originally wanted to show off and prove themselves, would not let go of such an opportunity. After the three of them discussed, they came up with a military plan to lure the enemy in and surround them to destroy them. Everything was going smoothly. The Maori regularization was surrounded by more than 4 times the number of soldiers, completely cutting off any thoughts of escape. At this moment, Fukata Tani's face was full of smiles and joy. The surrounded Maori regularization was still struggling to lead his troops. From time to time he would anxiously look behind him. He was waiting for the arrival of the Supreme General. With 50,000 reinforcements arriving, the gap in strength would be reduced. They would still have the strength to fight. At the very least, their chances of breaking out of the encirclement would be much higher. Unfortunately, the Maori regularization was destined not to be able to wait for reinforcements. At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not feeling good either. He who was following behind had also fallen into the trap of the 5-Star Army. At this moment he was surrounded by 30,000 veterans of the 1st Reserve Division and the 7th Army, who were all armed with firearms. At daybreak, such a scene appeared in front of him. While Ashikaga Yoshimasa was shocked, he also felt a sense of powerlessness. He did not expect the situation in front of him to be like this. There were still too many questions that he did not understand. Taking advantage of the fact that the two sides were only surrounding each other and had not yet engaged in battle, Ashikaga Yoshimasa took the initiative to ride to the front of the army. He asked the two division commanders Tiansu and Su Kuda who were opposite him, "The two of you I admit defeat this time. Before I fight to the death there is one thing that I would like to clarify. Seeing that I may die, please tell me the answer. Don't let me be a confused ghost, okay?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa lowered his noble head just to ask a question. As the soon-to-be victors Tiansu and Su Kuda, of course, would fulfill his request. Tiansu took the initiative to say, "Okay, as long as your question does not involve any military secrets, we can consider telling you the answer." "Thank you." Imitating the Han people, Ashikaga Yoshimasa clasped his fist and bowed again. Then he raised his head and asked, "Last night your camp was ablaze. That should be the rations being burned, right? Also, there were so many corpses on the ground. I saw that they were indeed people who died not long ago. I want to ask, what is going on?" Chapter 1130. If it weren't for the existence of these two facts, with Ashikaga Yoshimasa's suspicious personality, why would he take the initiative to chase after them? If that was the case, they wouldn't be trapped now. These two questions were really puzzling, but they didn't involve any military secrets. After Tiansu and Su Ku exchanged glances, Tiansu laughed and said, "Okay, then we'll fulfill your wish and let you be a ghost who understands everything. To tell you the truth, the provisions were indeed burned, but it's just moldy food. It can only emit the smell, but it can't be eaten. As for the corpses of the dead Japanese army soldiers, it's even easier to explain. During this period of time, there were many people in your country who opposed our 5-star army. They took the opportunity to burn, kill, and loot and did all kinds of evil. Because of this, many of them were captured. I just didn't expect them to play such a role before they died, but thinking about it, it's worth it." As soon as Tiansu's voice fell, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face became very ugly. He didn't expect that those who died were actually his own people who opposed the 5-star army. Those who were supposed to support him were now mercilessly killed on the battlefield, and became bait for his own destruction. This scene was really unacceptable. Ashikaga Yoshimasa sat on the horse as if he was scared silly. Using this opportunity, the 5-star army launched a general attack. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, whose will was affected, no longer had the energy to command the army. Coupled with the all-out assault of the 7th Army, the battle became one-sided from the beginning. Just before the sky turned dark, the main force of the Japanese army who lost the will to resist was destroyed and most of them were captured. Among them, Ashikaga Yoshimasa and Maori regularization died in the battle. Even before they died, their final plan to escape from the Japanese Empire was not realized. The news of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's death on the battlefield was spread by some deserters. The Japanese Naval Division General Kuroda Naganori, who was preparing to meet him in Chonglu Prefecture, quickly left on a ship, taking 100,000 Japanese Army Navy Division and disappeared into the vast sea. Even if the 5-star Army Navy Division and Navy Division went all out to chase after him, they still couldn't find him. When the news was passed back to Yang Chendong, although there was a trace of regret, he still gave the order to stop the chase. For the sake of a stray dog who escaped, sending 2 elite Navy divisions to chase after him was meaningless. With the escape of Kuroda, the general situation of the Japanese Empire was already set. The next step was to encircle and annihilate some of the opposition forces in the remote areas and re-establish the political system. It was not the first time that Xianxia had occupied other forces, so he was already familiar with the way. In less than 5 days, Du Jin, who had come from Korea, arrived here. He was the governor of Wa province appointed by Yang Chendong. Judging from the time, he should have received the news a long time ago. At this point, the War of the Japanese Empire lasted 14 months from January 1458 to February 1459. The Japanese Empire became a part of Xianxia's territory and changed its name to Japan Province. The governor was Du Jin and the general was Fukada Tani. In order to maintain the stability and prosperity of Japan Province, not only did Xianxia open a lot of businesses here, but Yang Chendong also allowed 100,000 soldiers and 100,000 navy divisions to stay here. At the same time that Shaowei Province was established, many mines were being developed at the same time. According to Yang Chendong's memories from his previous life, many mines that would take many years to be discovered were being developed one by one, especially silver mines. It could be imagined that with so many silver mines being developed, It would be a great financial support for Xianxia's forces. Of course, these things were handed over to the new governor, Du Jin, to deal with. As Japan province was established and gradually stabilized, Yang Qindong's eyes began to move to the west, which was Baiming and the grasslands. Before this, a piece of news first appeared in front of Yang Qindong. According to Su Yozhen, 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions had arrived at Japan province's South Sea Road. Because communication was blocked, these people didn't know that the Japanese Empire had been replaced by Yangxia's Japan province. They're here to give you a gift. Alright, accept it. After receiving the news, Yang Qindong laughed and gave the order. In reality, this wasn't a coincidence. It was something that Yang Qindong had planned for a long time. Even the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army had been mobilized from the battlefield to welcome these 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions. 50,000 Baiming Navy divisions weren't much, not to mention that they had just been established, so their fighting strength was mediocre. The reason why Yang Qindong attached so much importance to them was to attack Baiming Navy divisions and use this name to make a move against Baiming. Yes, Yang Qindong had already decided to go to war with Baiming. Since the other party wanted to attack the new Second Army, it would be impolite not to reciprocate. Of course, he had to return the favor. As for whether this battle would be a partial one or a full-scale one, it would depend on the development of the situation. Baiming Navy divisions naturally knew Yang Qindong's intentions, especially the Navy Division General Song Yong. At this moment he was standing on a ship in high spirits, looking at the Japanese army soldiers and civilians who were lining the streets to welcome him. South Sea Road, Tosa Prefecture. This place was close to the coastline and was also the only way for various forces to enter this place. Now, in front of the largest dock here, there were tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians of the Japanese Empire. They were shouting the slogan of the Celestial Empire to welcome the guests from afar. Song Yong, who was leading a group of Baiming Navy divisions, had a full smile on his face. He was very happy in his heart. Everything in front of him made him very excited. After all, it would be strange if he wasn't in a good mood after receiving such a welcome. What made him the happiest was that on the way here, they had encountered the 5-star army at sea. At that time he was very nervous. Everyone knew that the 5-star army's navy divisions were very powerful. Just when Song Yong was sweating cold sweat and was thinking about whether to return the fleet or not, the 5-star army's navy divisions suddenly retreated. It was as if they were afraid of them. The difference between heaven and earth made Song Yong a little confused, but he quickly remembered that he was representing Baiming. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. It was still not something that anyone could spy on. It was precisely because of this experience that Song Yong was full of confidence in this operation. Even the powerful 5-star army's navy divisions didn't dare to be enemies with him. What else was there to be afraid of? As a result, his task this time should be very simple. Along the way, his mood became very happy. When he arrived at the island of the Japanese Empire, he saw the huge crowd here to welcome him. The trace of worry he had disappeared. Song Yong's mood was very good. With his hands behind his back, he walked forward steadily with a confident smile on his face. It gave people the feeling that as soon as they appeared here, they would be able to quickly solve the crisis here. After Song Yong got off the ship and received a warm welcome, more and more Baiming soldiers also got off the ship one after another. After drifting on the sea for so many days, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Now that they could walk on land and they were so welcomed, it was a very wonderful thing. The person in charge of welcoming Song Yong was a Japanese army general called Okabe Uchiyama. It was said that he was a very important general under Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He was responsible for receiving Song Yong and his party. This Okabe Uchiyama, who was not very tall and even looked a little wretched, seemed to be very good at grasping people's hearts. He had a smile on his face that made people feel like they were bathing in spring. He accompanied Song Yong all the way to a small town not far from the dock. General Song, we thank the great Ming Empire for sending troops to support us. In order to express our gratitude, the great Ming Empire has prepared food and wine, as well as beautiful women. We will certainly not let General Song down. At the same time, Okabe Uchiyama took out 2 banknotes worth 100,000 silver from his arms like a magic trick and put them in Song Yong's hand when no one was looking. Song Yong's eyes only glanced at the banknotes. After seeing the amount on it, the originally very happy Song Yong's face became even redder. He didn't expect to have such a harvest. It was said that the Japanese Empire was a small country, poor and pitiful. He thought that coming here would be difficult, but now it seems that this was not the case. It has to be said that the great Ming Empire's people were prejudiced. Under the Confucian education, they seemed to be the only orthodox people in the world, and they were the most powerful. Because of this, they had a sense of superiority, but if they underestimated the great Ming Empire, it was only a matter of time before they suffered a big loss. Back to the topic, Song Yong held the banknotes in his arms and patted his chest in joy as he said to Okabe Uchiyama, "General Okabe, you can rest assured. With our Baiming Navy here, the 5-star army will not dare to act rashly. They are only the subjects of Bugnam of Zhou Xian. How could they dare to become enemies with the Emperor of Baiming?" Good, with General Song's words, that's great. And how about this, let's drink and eat first. In the words of the Han people, it's a welcoming dinner for everyone. After that we'll go and rest. I've arranged a surprise for General Song in the room. As for the 5-star army, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Okabe Uchiyama's eyes were squinted, and he was smiling so much that his eyes almost disappeared. He was expressing his joy. Of course, Song Yong knew what an unexpected surprise was. He had just seen a lot of girls from the Japanese Empire in the crowd. They were all dressed up beautifully and their eyes were like silk. Their faces were so soft that it seemed like water could be squeezed out of them. There were a lot of girls and they had already attracted the attention of the Baiming Navy soldiers. Okabe Uchiyama had also intentionally mentioned the word beautiful. So how could he not know what it meant? Good, then I will have to trouble General Okabe. General Song is too polite. This is what we should do. You are here to help us. Okabe Uchiyama continued to laugh. Those girls were indeed from the Japanese Empire, but they were different from normal girls from the Japanese Empire. They were the family members of the great generals and the soldiers. Now that the great general was dead, as the family members and relatives, they naturally needed an explanation. In the end, after some consideration, Okabe Uchiyama gathered them together and started a sex business. Chapter 1131. Unlike the women in the brothel, they were only responsible for solving the personal problems of the soldiers. When the matter was reported to Yang Chendong, he hesitated for a while, but in the end he did not refuse. On the contrary, he gave a name to these women, calling them comfort women. Speaking of which, this was naturally not tolerated by the great Ming dynasty and even the thousands of years of Huaxia's Confucianism. However, when he thought of what happened in Nanjing in his previous life, and how many women in Huaxia were harmed by the Japanese Empire, he could not bear to do it. He took it as an interest. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that when the children of the sinners found out that they did not need to die, and only needed to serve the men, and if they performed well, they could even get money to help the sinners get out of trouble. Most of them did not object, and instead they were excited that they could do something for their families. This was the nature of servility and lowliness. After hearing about this, Yang Chendong finally did not say anything. Even when the 8th madam found out about this, she did not say anything. First of all, these were the children of the sinners, and it would be unreasonable if they were not punished. Second of all, in the Japanese Empire, men were superior to women. Now that they had a chance to wash away all the shame, this kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Of course, Junko also asked Yang Chendong about this matter. She meant that the daughters of the sinners could do this, but the ordinary people did not need to do this. Otherwise, what would the men of the Japanese Empire do? Yang Chendong, who did not agree to this, quickly satisfied Junko's request. He stipulated that only the daughters of the sinners could enter the comfort women. If there was any coercion, no matter who was involved, no matter what level of authority was involved, they would all be severely punished. In this way, an independent group of women appeared, and the first task they received was to entertain the 50,000 Baiming soldiers who came from afar. They wanted to make them happy and satisfied so that they would put down all their vigilance and work hard for the next plan. Under special arrangements, more and more women from the Japanese Empire were brought to the temporary barracks of the Baiming Navy outside the town. Because there were too many wolves and too little meat, it was said that there were some disputes when it was almost nighttime. Some soldiers even had internal strife and fights because of the lack of women. Of course, this was only a small matter because in the middle of the night, something even bigger happened. Countless soldiers of the five-star army suddenly appeared like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. With lightning speed they took control of the 50,000 Baiming navy soldiers. Many soldiers could not understand this sudden scene. Some of them put on their clothes and picked up their weapons to resist, but they were quickly suppressed. In the face of the five-star army, who was many times stronger than them in terms of both numbers and combat power, and they were completely unprepared, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The 50,000 Baiming navy soldiers were all captured, and even the soldiers who stayed on the ships did not have the chance to escape. They were all wiped out by the five-star army. The last one was Song Yong, who was enjoying the pleasure of a man in the town. When he was sleeping soundly with a woman from the Japanese Empire in each of his arms, the five-star army suddenly rushed into his room and made him fall from heaven to hell. The naked Song Yong was pulled out of his bed with his butt naked. Song Yong didn't wake up until his body touched the ground and he felt the coldness of the neon soil in February. Then he shouted, "What are you doing? I am the general of the Baiming Navy and I am here to help you. Are you trying to rebel?" Song Yong's shout was not soft, but no one cared. When he was dragged all the way to the main hall of the room under the bright lights, he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat. He was wearing a green robe and his entire body was emitting an oppressive aura. Yang Chendong was not just a name but a famous person. Although there was no photography at that time, there were many excellent artists. Yang Chendong's appearance had long been spread among the people. Song Yong was a general who commanded 50,000 soldiers, and this time he was going to make things difficult for the five-star army. How could he not recognize him? So when he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat, his brain instantly short-circuited. He did not expect Yang Chendong to appear here. For a moment he reflexively said, "Bugnam of Gojosian, why are you here? Shouldn't you be facing the siege of the Japanese army in Ping and Beijing?" Ignorant guy. Let me tell you, the Japanese Empire is gone. Before you could even set foot on this land, it had already been conquered by this king. Yang Chendong's voice carried a trace of ridicule. The dignified Baiming actually sent such a good-for-nothing general to deal with him. He did not know if he should say that the other party was ignorant or arrogant. Like a bolt from the blue, when these words entered Song Yong's ears, he was so shocked that he could not speak. The powerful Japanese Empire was actually defeated and conquered by the five-star army. He wanted to say that this was impossible, but when he thought of Yang Chendong's previous actions, it seemed that it was not impossible. Especially now that he was surrounded by the five-star army's generals and soldiers, and there was no Japanese army around. There were also no sounds of killing. This was enough to prove everything. Song Yong was not a general with a backbone. The only reason he was able to be in his current position was because he was smooth and slick. Now that he knew that the situation was not good for him, the only thing he could think of was to save himself. In front of so many five-star army's generals, Song Yong knelt on the ground and crawled at Yang Chendong's feet. Under the light, his white butt was very dazzling. "Bugnam of Gojosian, this general was wrong. I should not have come to be your enemy. But all of this was the emperor's will. This general did not dare to disobey. Don't worry, as long as you let me go back, I will definitely not be an enemy of the five-star army. I am willing to swear." With snot and tears, Song Yong did not have the demeanor of a general at all. But right now, not only did his appearance not make people feel any pity or sympathy, it only made him receive countless disdain. In front of so many generals, if he had some backbone, even if he died, he would still receive everyone's respect. But kneeling and begging for mercy was the most cowardly display. Soldiers were cowardly while generals were cowardly. Could be imagined that even the general leading the army was like this. It would be strange if they could train qualified and outstanding soldiers. Yang Chendong was also speechless at Song Yong's current appearance. He originally thought that the other party would appear and reprimand him. After all, from a righteous point of view, the other party had received the order of the Emperor of Baiming, while he was just a king. He had even planned to talk back to him, but he never thought that the other party would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. This made him unable to say a lot of the words he had prepared. Of course, Song Yong's fear of death made it much easier for Yang Chendong to carry out the next military plan. First, he rolled his eyes at Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground. Then he turned his gaze to Yang Er, who was standing next to him. He then covered Song Yong with a sheet. Although the thin sheet couldn't play an absolute role in this cold weather, it could still cover his face. I'll leave the rest to you. Yang Qindong suddenly lost interest. A person who was so afraid of death, as long as he didn't take his life, he would not refuse to do anything he wanted him to do. After saying this to Beta Persei, Yang Qindong said to the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the commander of the new army, Su He, who were waiting at the side. The 3 of you go back and prepare. The army will set off tomorrow morning. Yes. The 3 generals, who had always been arrogant after hearing Yang Qindong's words, they all respectfully lowered their heads and answered. At the same time, the 3 of them were also very excited. After such a long time, could they finally compete with the Baiming army? After Yang Qindong left, Beta Persei did not leave with him. Instead, he appeared in front of Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground with a smile on his face. General Song, it's time for us to have a good talk, but I don't know if you're willing to cooperate. Don't worry, even if you don't cooperate, I won't kill you. Instead, I'll make you feel worse than death. Although Beta Persei had a smile on his face, Song Yong felt a chill and a sense of danger. He immediately said desperately, General, please rest assured that I will cooperate. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything. A few hours later, when the sky had just brightened, tens of thousands of the 5-star army boarded Baiming's ships and disappeared. In just one day, the docks in Tosa Prefecture regained its tranquility. If it was someone who did not know, they would not be able to imagine that this place would be so lively yesterday. Shajing City. Tomorrow was the 20th day, which meant that he only had one night to delay. He had to make a decision whether to surrender or fight. Sitting in the study room, the candlelight reflected on his face. He had only been surrounded for a few months, but at this moment he looked a lot paler than before. Mental exhaustion was the reason for all of this. Originally, he was just a Mongolian general, and he was even the kind of general who was not valued. In the past, even eating and dressing had been a problem. However, everything changed after meeting Yang Qindong. He was put in an important position and was treated better. Especially the trust he had in Yang Qindong made him feel like he was willing to die for his bosom friend. Especially after he became the commander of the new 2nd Army, he was ready to go all out. He wanted to let everyone know that the 6th young master did not misjudge him. He had such strength, and most importantly, he had such loyalty. Chapter 1132. Everything was destroyed as the 2 cities of Shajing and Jingzhou were besieged. At this moment, the fate of hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of soldiers was in his own hands. Perhaps a wrong decision would cause everyone to lose their lives, or perhaps a wrong decision would allow everyone to continue living. The choice had made Shibi very anxious. He had sent telegrams to Yang Qindong more than once to express his worries. He had also asked him to lead the new 2nd Army to break out of the encirclement. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of people in the 2 cities might suffer. Under the heavy encirclement, he could not guarantee how many people in the new 2nd Army could escape. But at least he did not lower his head. He lived up to the trust Yang Qindong had in him. However, everything came to an abrupt end with a new telegram from Yang Qindong. It clearly said, the changes in the situation often catch people off guard. But thinking back to the humiliation of Han Xian and the suffering of the king of Yu, it all proves that temporarily lowering your head and lying low is also a wise move. As for where to go, no matter what decision you make, I believe in you. It was a simple sentence. There was no deliberate guidance or command. It was a sentence that placed all the initiative in his hands. But the more it was like this, the more Shibi felt the weight of the responsibility. He could not make a decision for a long time. Master, outside the door, Division Commander Kong Ji and Guard Captain Wu asked to see you. Just when Shibi was still struggling in his heart and could not make any decision, the voice of the butler sounded outside the door. Kong Ji, the division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new 2nd Army, could be said to be second only to Shibi in the army. In other words, once something happened to Shibi, Kong Ji would be the temporary division commander of the new 2nd Army. This was also what Yang Qindong had said when he established the new 2nd Army. Wu Xiaoyi, Shibi's guard captain, was not only strong but also loyal. It could be said that he was the last line of defense to ensure Shibi's safety. When something big happened, Shibi would discuss it with him. It could be seen that he was also a very important figure in the new 2nd Army. It was these 2 people who came together in the night. Even Shibi did not pay attention to them. Please. Soon the housekeeper brought the two of them into the study. Knowing that there was something important to discuss, the housekeeper took the initiative to leave and closed the door. When there were only 3 people left in the room, the atmosphere could not help but become a little tense. Perhaps everyone knew that time was limited, so after a few moments of silence, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division took the initiative to ask, "Commander, tomorrow is the deadline given by Baiming. What's your decision?" Shibi didn't answer immediately. Instead she asked, "What do you two think?" At this moment the atmosphere in the room became tense again. The 3 of them knew that every decision would affect the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. But no matter how difficult it was, the decision still had to be made. After Division Commander Kong Ji and the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi looked at each other, the former said, "Commander, Shajing City is now surrounded by Baiming's army. There is a shortage of food in the city. Even the soldiers have changed from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day. Their combat strength is going to decline. Under such circumstances we may have to surrender." As soon as Kong Ji finished speaking, the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi on the side agreed. "That's right. We are too weak. If we fight head-on we won't have a good ending. So I agree to surrender to Baiming." The 2 right-hand men spoke at the same time. After hearing this, Shibi's face became very ugly. She even trembled all over. Obviously she was very angry. Under such circumstances Kong Ji didn't seem to see it. He still asked, "Commander, what do you mean?" "What do I mean? Of course I don't agree. So what if we die? At most we will be a hero again after 18 years. But if we really surrender to Baiming, we will be cutting ourselves off from the 5th Star Army and the 6th Young Master. When that time comes, do you think you can live with your conscience? Even if we survive, we will be struggling at death's door. So, I will never surrender. At most we will fight until both sides suffer. I believe that with a strong defense, even Baiming's army won't be able to take advantage of us. Even if we lose in the end we will take a bite out of them." Shibi said these words with a face full of anger. It was completely different from his usual calmness. He was really angry. He didn't expect that the 2 people he trusted the most would choose to surrender. This was what he couldn't stand. With this angry shout, Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi instantly became mute. Obviously, they didn't expect that the usually calm and resourceful commander would act so crazily. However, after a few moments, Kong Ji was the first to react. He also said in a very emotional tone, "Commander, are you really going to choose to fight head-on? Don't you know that if you really do this, it means that hundreds of thousands of people will die? How can you bear to do this?" "Of course I can't bear to do this, but compared to the 6th Young Master's importance, I am more unwilling to betray him even if it means death." Shibi's voice was resolute and decisive. At this moment, it seemed like Shibi had made the final decision. Shibi was the commander of an army. If he made this decision then the matter was basically settled. Therefore these words were the final decision. If nothing unexpected happened, Rong Shao would come to the residence tomorrow and get this result. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi should have been furious when they heard the result. After all, their lives had been lost as well. However, for some reason not only were they not angry, they even chuckled. Ha ha, 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 ha. Xia Biao had been waiting for the 2 of them to interrogate him, and had even prepared himself for a big fight, when he suddenly heard endless laughter. At this moment even he didn't know what was going on, so he looked at the 2 of them. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi stood at attention almost at the same time, then solemnly saluted him. "Commander, we are sorry. Just now we were just testing you. In fact, we have the same thoughts as you. We can't let down the 5-Star Army and we can't let down Bugnam of Gojosian." Shibi saw the 2's actions. At this moment he finally understood what was going on. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. "To be honest, the 2 of you really made me angry just now. I thought there was something wrong with my eyes again. Hehe, we can't learn from people like Su Yuan. I was personally chosen by the 6th Young Master. How could I do such a thing?" "That's right." First he reprimanded Su Yuan verbally. Then Kong Ji continued, "Commander, your choice and loyalty are admirable and we should learn from you. However, the matter of Shajing City cannot be delayed. We must give you an explanation." "What explanation do you need?" "Of course, we refuse to surrender and prepare to fight." This time Shibi said without hesitation. "No. Unexpectedly, Kong Ji, who just said that they couldn't let down the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojosian, changed his mind. Commander, we can't fight. If we fight, our new second army will definitely be defeated. Even the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the two cities won't be any better. We can't fight. Then we have to surrender? This time Shibi was confused by Kong Ji's words. That's right, we can only surrender. Kong Ji's voice was firm as he spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, Wuxia, who had been silent for a long time, said, "We can only surrender. Commander, this is what we think." For the entire night the candlelight in the study room never went out. As for what the three of them talked about, even the housekeeper who was in charge of guarding the door didn't know. The sky was finally bright and those who were supposed to come would come. Just after breakfast, the merchant Rong Xiao, accompanied by the infantry division commander Su Yuan, appeared at the headquarters of the new Second Army. Not only them, but there were also hundreds of infantry soldiers who came with them. They were all armed. The appearance of these people was a signal. If Shibi didn't agree to surrender, they would be responsible for protecting Su Yuan and Rong Xiao until they safely left the headquarters of the new Second Army. They were even willing to fight among themselves. In the main hall of the headquarters of the new Second Army, Shibi sat there quietly. Although it was not late for the entire night, his eyes were still bright and full of spirit. At this moment he was sitting there and watching everything that happened in the courtyard with an expressionless face. Especially when he saw Su Yuan appear with hundreds of soldiers, he couldn't help but snort coldly. "Su Yuan, are you planning to rebel?" Under Shibi's leadership for many years, Su Yuan was more or less a little afraid. However, when he saw Rong Xiao beside him and the soldiers behind him, he couldn't help but feel a little more confident. "Commander, you know that I won't be your enemy. I'm only doing this to protect myself." "Humph, I knew you wouldn't have the guts to do so." Seeing Su Yuan take the initiative to show weakness, Shibi snorted coldly. Then he looked at Rong Xiao and said, "You're here for an answer, right?" "General, she is wise. You said 20 days will pass, but I wonder what you'll choose." Rong Xiao chuckled and spoke with the attitude of a victor. After letting out a long sigh, Shibi did not immediately answer. Instead, he first raised his head to look at the sky before standing up with a sad expression. He walked into his courtyard and knelt on the ground under everyone's gazes. He was kneeling in the direction of the beginning city. "Sixth young master, I've let you down. If you want to be angry, you can just kill or torture me. I'm doing this for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and citizens." Chapter 1133. Rong Xiao, who was watching from the side, couldn't help showing a hint of fondness in his eyes. He seemed to have thought of the result that the other party was going to give. It seemed that Shibi had made the decision to surrender. So he could take down Shajing and Jingzhou without shedding any blood. As the executor, he would make a great contribution. At that time his future would be limitless. As Rong Xiao expected, after a while Shibi stood up and made the decision to surrender to Baiming, but he still put forward two conditions. First, everything he had now was given by Bugnam of Gojosian, so he would never be his enemy. He could help Baiming deal with other enemies except for Xianxia and the 5-star army. Second, no one could hurt the 100,000 people in Shajing and Jingzhou. Even if they did something extreme, as long as they didn't rebel against Baiming, no one could be caught, let alone killed. If Baiming could agree to the two conditions as the commander of the new Second Army, Shibi could draft a letter of surrender to Baiming and announce it to the world. Shibi finally made a decision, and it was a decision that satisfied him. Rong Xiao was already very happy, so he nodded and agreed. "General Shibi's two conditions, I agree on behalf of Baiming. Please write the letter to the world now." "There's no hurry. Let's talk about it after you write down the two conditions. To be honest, I don't trust you." She looked at Rong Xiao with some disdain. Her eyes were extremely cold. Well said. But before that, shouldn't General Shibi express something first? After all, I can't completely trust you. Rong Xiao rolled his eyes, suppressing the anger in his heart from being looked down upon, and said thoughtfully, "Yes, but how should I express it?" Shibi asked back. "This." Rong Xiao first glanced at Su Yuan beside him, then said thoughtfully, "Why don't you give the order to completely hand over the safety of Shajing City to General Su? This way you can show your sincerity." Although Su Yuan was still the commander of the new Second Army's infantry division, It seemed that he had already surrendered to Baiming. With him in charge of the city's safety, Rongxiao and Baiming would be relieved. Shibi naturally knew this, so after pondering for a moment he nodded and agreed. Okay, I agree. Good. Rongxiao couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Once Su Yuan was in charge of the city's defense, it would be difficult for Shibi to go back on his word. At the very least, if they really fought, Su Yuan would only need to open the city gates and Baiming's army would be able to rush in. At that time, with the advantage of more than 10 times their military strength, victory would definitely belong to them. Forced, Shibi finally made the decision to surrender. Although this was betraying Yang Chendong, it also saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. When the news first spread out from the city, when it came from the mouth of Infantry Division Commander Su Yuan, many of the soldiers and commoners in the city who heard this news all shed tears. Most of them joined Xianxia's big family later, but even so they still enjoyed many benefits. They originally thought that their lives would change greatly and become better and better, but the sudden appearance of Baiming's army shattered all their fantasies. Now they had returned to Baiming and became Baiming's people. It was impossible to say that they didn't have any thoughts in their hearts. However, the situation was like this. Facing Baiming's army that was like a wolf and a tiger, what could they do? Were they really going to risk their lives? If that was the case, no one would be able to survive. Rongxiao acted very quickly. In just 5 days he received a letter of guarantee written by Baiming's commander, Shi Heng, agreeing to give up the 2 requirements. Shibi didn't act shamelessly after that. He took out the document that he had written long ago. It stated that the 2 cities Shajing and Jingzhou would belong to Baiming from now on. They would leave the embrace of Xianxia, which was also Bugnam of Zhou. After receiving the document, Rongxiao quickly announced it to the world and spread it widely. First city. In Xianxia City, which was the closest city to Shajing City, the army commander Tiger's Mane immediately called for a military meeting when he saw the document written by Shibi. They reached a very unified goal, which was to absolutely not let this happen. They had to leave Shajing City and give it to the new Second Army. Now it should be said that the Baiming army was powerful and let them know that betraying Bugnam of Zhou would definitely not end well. The one who led the troops was Ma Xiangshan, the commander of the new First Army's light cavalry regiment. As a light cavalry regiment, their advantage was that they were fast enough. They could be described as coming and going like the wind. With such an advantage, even if they encountered danger, they had a great chance to escape. Unfortunately, they went out with a face of anger. However, not long after they left the first city, they met Fang Dingshan, who had been waiting here for a long time. Fang Dingshan led the Liaodong Iron Cavalry, which had expanded to 70,000 people and set up a formation. It was as if as long as they rushed over, they would kill all of them. Although Ma Xiangshan was very angry, considering the comparison of the forces of both sides and the fact that the Liaodong Iron Cavalry was also an elite cavalry force, in the end his rationality prevailed over the anger in his heart. He had to order the army to retreat and return to the first city behind him. Without the external force, Shajing City and Jingzhou City fell into the hands of the Baiming army as they wished. In order to achieve the goal of completely controlling these 2 cities, the Baiming commander Shi Heng, who was now in charge of the security of this area, ordered more than 100,000 Baiming army to enter the 2 cities. In addition, Su Yuan's infantry division was firmly on the side of Baiming. At this moment, the advantage of the military strength fell into the hands of Baiming. After the fall of the 2 cities, especially after the 100,000 Baiming army entered, they were not people who followed the rules. Gradually there were some incidents of burning and looting. Perhaps it was because their military pay was too low and there were many good things in the 2 cities. Under the greed there were many open robberies. In just a single day's time, more than 10 shops were robbed, over 100 women were taken, and several dozen commoners were killed on the streets. Because of this, he was extremely unhappy. He wrote a letter to Commander Shi Heng, expressing the resentment in his heart. Unfortunately, even if Shi Heng personally stepped in, he could only control the situation from worsening. As for the Baiming soldiers who robbed and killed before, none of them were punished. Obviously, Baiming had used a compromise. They did not want to anger Shibi and cause a mutiny among the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, but they also did not want to hurt the morale of their own soldiers. Naturally, Shibi was not happy about this. However, he did not expect that his guard captain Wu Xiaoyi would actually ride out of the manor alone in a fit of anger. He charged into the northern Ming military camp in broad daylight and found a few criminals. The northern Ming soldiers who had killed the commoners did not say a word and killed them with a saber. Wu Xiaoyi's actions naturally attracted the anger of the other Baiming soldiers. After being surrounded, he was finally captured alive. Then the matter was reported to Shibi. Shibi was still living in the city lord's mansion and did not seem to have been stripped of any power. However, when Rong Xiao and Su Yuan appeared here again, their expressions were clearly much more arrogant than before. In the past they had come to ask for help. However, this time they came to denounce them, so their aura was naturally different. In the hall, Rong Xiao questioned Shibi. He said that because of guard captain Wu Xiaoyi, 4 Baiming soldiers had died. This matter had caused the army to be extremely dissatisfied, and an explanation had to be given. Explanation? What explanation? You promised me before that you would not harm the people in the city. What did you do? Guard Captain Wu only acted out of indignation. You can say that he was willing to do so. Shibi naturally would not allow the other party to criticize him and took the initiative to counterattack. Even if you are dissatisfied, you can't just casually charge into the army camp and kill people. If you don't follow the rules, how can we explain this to the soldiers? Therefore Wu Xiaoyi must die. Of course, we were also in the wrong before. How about this? General Shibi will personally deal with Wu Xiaoyi. This can be considered as us giving you face. Furthermore, we can guarantee that no one will harass the people in the city in the future. Rong Xiao had already thought of what to say. At this moment he appeared to be awe-inspiring and righteous. However, they did not kill Wu Xiaoyi and instead handed him over to Shibi for him to kill. This action was truly too sinister. Hearing this, Shibi's eyes flashed with uncontrollable anger. Just as he was about to say something, Rong Xiao spoke again. General Shi, don't forget that we agreed before. If someone rebels, then we have the authority to deal with them. Your guard captain actually charged into our Baiming army to kill people. Isn't that no different from a rebellion? Of course, if you can't be ruthless enough to deal with him, then you can hand him over to our army. However, I'm afraid that if we do that, Wu Xiaoyi will suffer even more. This was a threat. However, Shibi could not say anything. Who told Wu Xiaoyi to be so impulsive? In order to prevent the people in the city from being bullied and for the security of the 2 cities to return to peace, Shibi had no choice but to agree. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes as she said, "All right, we'll do as you say." Very good. Shibi finally compromised. All of this fell into Rong Xiao's eyes and made him very happy. He believed that once the news of Wu Xiaoyi being killed by Shibi spread, this new second army commander's authority would be suppressed to the lowest level. At that time, even if he had any disloyalty, he would not be able to stir up any waves. Not long after Rong Xiao left, Wu Xiaoyi was sent to the city lord's manor. Following him was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He knelt on the ground and pleaded with the other guards, namely Shibi's personal guards. Chapter 1134. Although Shibi couldn't bear all of this, he still issued the order to execute Wu Xiaoyi in the end. The execution was carried out in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion. Present were Shibi, Kong Ji, a group of personal guards and several supervisors sent by the Baiming army. Shibi's eyes were filled with tears and he shouted the word "kill" in pain. After laughing, Wu Xiaoyi's head fell to the ground. When the news spread out, the whole city was in an uproar. Everyone felt that there was no hope for the future. Because of this matter, Shibi also developed a grudge with Kong Ji and the other 2 cavalry division commanders. It was said that even if it was his order, the 3 division commanders began to resist. Rong Xiao heard this news in the mansion in the city. Of course, he was very satisfied. He believed that it wouldn't be long before there was internal strife among Shibi and the others. That would be the time to deal with these high-level figures. At that time, it would be the time for them to send people to seize the military power. Jing and Jingzhou seemed to have calmed down. As time passed, when the morale of the army and the people's hearts were slack, they would completely belong to Baiming. And for all of this, the 5-star army didn't seem to do anything, especially the first city. It seemed that they couldn't even protect themselves because after dealing with Jing and Jingzhou, hundreds of thousands of Baiming troops began to surround the first city. An even bigger storm seemed to be about to begin. The new Ergon-Dusi area had now been renamed Liaodong by Zhou Xian. In the sea town of the Twin City Guard, which was the town that Yang Qindong first came to when he attacked the grassland, it was very lively at the moment. Countless five-star army came ashore from here. They disguised themselves as Baiming sea soldiers and entered the town with lightning speed. When the 200 Baiming soldiers guarding the town realized that something was wrong, they were already on the chopping block. The army that appeared here was the five-star army led by Yang Qindong. Moreover, it was the main force of the army. For example, the army that came along this time was the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the New Army. In addition, there were also 30,000 C-ranked soldiers transferred from Korea. The 3 divisions of the 4th Army Division had been deployed from the war against the Japanese Empire, and they were only the first batch. Following closely behind them were even more troops that had retreated from the battlefield of the Japanese Empire. As the vanguard troops, these 3 troops became Yang Qindong's fist forces. Their mission was to open a new passage here that led to the origin city from the outside world. In the past, Liaodong region was part of Baiming's territory. Even if Yang Qindong had any ideas, he would have suppressed them because of the general situation. But now they had already targeted the new Second Army. What was there to hesitate about? It was impolite not to reciprocate. Yang Qindong was not a person who would not retaliate. Compared to other people, he was originally a vengeful person. It was just that many times the time was not ripe and some of his ideas had not been formed yet. Looking at Baiming now, Korea and the Japanese Empire had been included in Xianxia's territory. At this time, Yang Qindong did not have so many concerns. Not to mention this time Baiming had provoked him first. Even if he fought back, it could be considered that he had a legitimate reason. Sea Town became Yang Qindong's first gate when he entered this place. It had to be said that Northern Ming was also filled with talents. Furthermore, this place was very close to the coast. It wasn't that no one had considered the possibility of the five-star army suddenly making a move. Although the probability of this happening was too small in many people's eyes, the nearby city guards still arranged for 200 people to be stationed here. They also prepared enough beacon towers to ensure that if there was an emergency, they would be able to warn the other cities and city guards in advance, giving them enough time to prepare. But obviously they had miscalculated again. With regards to the situation here, the Yang faction's intelligence department had already investigated thoroughly. They captured Song Yong alive and detained all of the Northern Bright Sea Division so that they could send their army here without attracting any attention. Now it seemed that this first step was right. At least the Baiming army outside Sea Town had not discovered them yet. Young master, what should we do next? Beta Persei stood beside Yang Qindong with his hand holding the hilt of his sword. There was some excitement on his face. Previously, when they were in the Japanese Empire, they had heard that Baiming had attacked the grassland and surrounded the 2 cities of Shaojing and Jingzhou. It was only because the Japanese Empire's war at that time that they really did not have the spare energy to take care of this place, that the Baiming army had been arrogant for a few days. Now that the war in the Japanese Empire had finally ended, it was naturally time for them to take revenge. It could be said that Yang Heir and the other warriors were filled with anger when they came here. Their first opponent was only around 200 people, and they had come here in the form of a surprise attack. This number of enemies was really not enough to fight, not enough to look at. Hearing Beta Persei's question, Division Commander Ling Daqiang, Division Commander Tian Hu, and Commander Su He all looked at Yang Qindong with shining eyes. Yang Qindong, who had already changed into a black armor, was now riding on the white dragon, looking into the distance thoughtfully. This was not the first time he had appeared in Sea Town, but compared to before, the pressure on him this time was obviously greater. It was not for anything else, but because his opponent this time was Baiming, the so-called orthodox in the eyes of the world. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into 2, Baiming's power could not be underestimated. The intelligence department showed that the other side had an army of more than 4 million soldiers, and this was not enough. They were still expanding, and this number alone was not easy to deal with. Not to mention Yang Qindong still had so many family members and businesses in the capital of Baiming. Perhaps if his business was gone he could start again. If his money was gone he could earn it again. But if his family members were gone, then it would be too late for Yang Qindong to regret. Fortunately, Baiming did not seem to have any intention of falling out with Yang Qindong. At least from the intelligence department's information, his family members were not targeted by Baiming, and even his business was still running. Thinking about it, Yang Qindong was not only Baiming's enemy, but also the enemy of the southern Ming dynasty and the kingdom of Waras Yeshen. Moreover, he was so powerful that Baiming had to go all out to fight with him. If both sides suffered heavy losses, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At that time, it would only give their opponent an opportunity. This was also the reason why Baiming did not want to fall out with Yang Qindong. They only wanted to eliminate Xia's forces around them, and then vigorously develop themselves. But even if it was this request, Yang Qindong would not easily agree. The grasslands were not Baiming's sphere of influence to begin with. Everything in the first city was obtained by Yang Qindong and his brothers step by step. Why, seeing that the meat was fat enough, now you want to kill it to satisfy your cravings. How could there be such a good thing in the world? From the moment he appeared here, Yang Qindong was already prepared to fall out with Baiming. The only difference was to what extent he would fall out with them in the end. Now that Beta Persei asked, he naturally would not be polite. He nodded lightly and said, "The next step is naturally to fight. Since someone has snatched 2 of our cities and dealt with one of our armies, then we will return the favor tenfold. And bring me the map." As soon as he finished speaking, Long Wei quickly sent the map to Yang Qindong. Then he pointed to the Shuangqing guards closest to Sea Town and said, "Commander Ling, take your 4th division and set off from here. First, capture this city. Remember, it's best if you don't hurt anyone. Then follow me to the Terran area." Yes. The commander of the 4th division, Ling Daqiang, immediately stood at attention and said with a happy expression. This was equivalent to the first battle, and this was handed over to Lung Feng. This was enough to prove the 6th young master's trust in them. Yang Qindong pointed to many places on the map one after another, then looked at Su He and asked in a deep voice, "Commander Su, from Shuangqing guards to the west, the Aujlan guards, the Tunhe guards, the Fuyu guards, the Duoyen guards, all the way to the Wonan River guards, as well as a large area in the north. I'll leave it all to you. Do you have the confidence to take them down one by one?" Su He's face was solemn, but his expression showed that he was extremely excited. He immediately stood at attention and said, "Please rest assured, Bugnam of Gojosian. Our new army promises to complete the mission." "Very good." Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Finally, his gaze fell on Tianhu and said, "With all the targets of the new army as a front line, this will be your defense area. In short, no reinforcements from Baiming are allowed to set foot here. If one appears, you will defeat it. Do you have a problem?" "No problem," Tianhu promised. As the number 1 cavalry unit, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, their mobility had always been the strongest. They were the most suitable to intercept reinforcements. The 3 capable generals had divided the work. The moment Yang Qindong ordered people to put away the map, he looked forward with bright eyes and said, "Very good. Since that's the case, everyone go and prepare. We will set off in 4 hours. Do not slack off." With the order, Yang Qindong's first initiative to mobilize troops against Baiming officially began. This also meant that Yang Qindong had enough confidence to compete with Baiming for the world. After the end of the naval battle, the land battle officially began. Shuangqing guards Qianhu Hiying. He was currently resting in his mansion in Shuangqing. He didn't feel that the war had begun and that he was in danger. This couldn't be blamed on him. Since Baiming began to vigorously develop their military, the status of the soldiers had increased a lot. Especially with the establishment of the Liaodong cavalry, many of the troublemakers in this area were recruited. Without those troublemakers causing trouble, Hiying felt that the security was a lot better. Therefore, during this period of time, he was very comfortable as a Qianhu. After dinner, he would hug his new concubine and sleep soundly in the room. It was really a happy thing in the world. It was wonderful. Chapter 1135. But as the saying goes, when a person sits at home, misfortune will come from the heavens. The sky had completely darkened, and the twin city guards, which was not very large, had also sunk into a state of silence. However, outside the He mansion, there was a series of urgent knocks on the door, causing many people in the mansion to be awakened. No matter what, Hiying was still a general, so he was still somewhat vigilant. The knocks on the door also woke him up, but the long period of peace did not make him think too much. Instead, he could not help but shout outside, What's going on? Who's knocking on the door? Why aren't you going to take a look? Without needing He Ying's orders, the door was already opened. Following that, a military commander rushed into the residence and quickly arrived at He Ying's door. With an urgent voice he said, "Sir, there's someone knocking on the city gates. The person claims to be Navy General Song Yong. Our brothers are not sure, please make a decision." Song Yong? A cry of surprise came from within the room. He Ying had naturally heard of this newly promoted Navy general before. Not only that, he had even seen this person before. But because the difference in status between the two of them was too great, they did not have a deep relationship. Song Yong was here. This made He Ying feel a little confused. No matter what, the other party was a Navy general with 50,000 soldiers. He was just a small Qianhu with 1,120 soldiers. The two of them were on the same level. Why would the other party come to his small twin city guards? His heart was filled with confusion, but He Ying did not dare to delay. He hurriedly put on his clothes and walked out of the room. When he saw the commander who came to report, he could not help but ask suspiciously, "Is it really General Song who came? Did you see clearly?" "Sir, we are of lowly status. How could we know such a big figure like General Song? We are really not sure. That's why we asked Sir to make a decision," the commander said with a troubled expression. He Ying thought that his words made sense and nodded. Then he arrogantly raised his head and walked towards the gates of the residence. As he walked, he said, "That's right, with your status, you naturally do not know General Song, but I do. Come, follow me to take a look." Under the admiring gaze of the Zhongqi, He Ying left the manor and arrived at the South City Gate under the protection of several bodyguards. At this moment, more than 100 Baiming soldiers had gathered here. They were all in charge of guarding the place. When they heard that a naval general had arrived, they gathered around out of curiosity. After seeing the arrival of the Qianhu, everyone moved aside, allowing He Ying to smoothly walk up to the top of the tower. Then, with the help of the torches downstairs, who else could it be but Song Yong on a horse downstairs? Seeing that it was really Song Yong, He Ying was very surprised. "General Song, didn't you lead the navy to attack the Japanese Empire? Why would he suddenly appear here?" "Who are you?" Song Yong, who was riding on his horse, asked when he heard someone call out to him. "General Song, I am the Qianhu of the Twin City Guards, He Ying." Since there was such an opportunity, He Ying naturally wanted to introduce himself. He Ying wanted to establish a good relationship, but Song Yong was impatient and shouted, "So it's Qianhu he. But since you know this general, why don't you open the gates? Are you going to refuse to let Shangguan through the gates?" Instead of answering directly, he scolded. Unfortunately, there were people who fell for this trick. For example, He Ying was such a person. When he heard Song Yong scolding him, he quickly apologized and said to the soldiers beside him, "What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and open the gates." Naturally, no one dared to disobey He Ying's orders. Soon there was the sound of the gates being opened. Then there was the sound of horse hooves and more black figures entered through the gates. At this moment, He Ying had already descended from the tower and was ready to welcome General Song Yong. However, when he descended from the tower, he was greeted with countless guns and arrows. Needless to say, this was the work of the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division. With someone like Song Yong leading the way, the Twin City Guards did not even need to fire a single shot. Logically speaking, Yang Qindong could have chosen to launch a night attack. With the soldiers of the 4th Infantry Division, climbing up the walls of the Twin City Guards was not a problem. It was just that he didn't want to make a move on the Han people, and he also needed to preserve the 2 city guards. Because this place would become the Yang faction's logistics base for a period of time, a lot of money and food sent from the sea would be temporarily stored here. So in the end, he chose to let Song Yong stand out and make a contribution. He Ying was just a small Qianhu. According to the intelligence department, this person bullied the common people all year round and was not a good person. Yang Qindong did not even have the intention to meet him and directly handed him over to the 4th Infantry Division's Ling Daqiang. "He has lived here for a long time. He must be very familiar with the situation in Liaodong. Open his mouth and let him know something beneficial to us. Don't worry, 6th young master." A smile flashed across Ling Daqiang's face. After agreeing, he turned around and left. Pass down the order, no soldiers are to disturb the people. At the same time, put up a notice saying that I, Bugnam of Gojoseon, have come. As long as the people here cooperate with us, They can receive money at any time. You can go and do this. Yang Qindong looked at Beta Persei who was following beside him and assigned tasks. Young master, please don't do that. After following Yang Qindong for a long time, Beta Persei knew his young master's feelings for the Han people. He also worked as a logistics division commander for a period of time. Beta Persei was naturally familiar with this small matter. Thus, half an hour later, there were many notices on the walls of the Shuangqing Guard Central City. A large number of people who were originally in a state of panic gathered to watch. Some literate scholars read the notices, and the other people knew that the one who came was King Wunan of Daimyong. The reason why they wanted to occupy this place was because when Bugnam of Gojosian made a move against the Japanese Empire, his rear, the grassland, was attacked by Baiming. Now that the Japanese Empire was dealt with and became a province of the Five-Star Army, Bugnam of Gojosian appeared in Liaodong. This time he came to give those who wanted to deal with him a look. The notice also emphasized that they only wanted to deal with those who opposed them. As for the ordinary people, they would not offend them in the slightest. Once a soldier violated the rules, the people could go to the yamen at any time to report it. Once it was verified, not only would it be dealt with, the person who reported it would also be given a certain amount of silver as a reward. At the end of the notice, it was written, "Next, the Five-Star Army will send a large number of military supplies here. They will be transported in all directions from the Shuangqing Guard Central City. A lot of labor will be needed. As long as the people are willing to participate, they will be distributed according to their labor. Based on preliminary calculations, a strong man could earn 1 tael of silver after working hard for a day. Even a capable woman could earn half a tael of silver." The notice that was posted quickly attracted a lot of discussion among the people. This was also Yang Qindong's request. He did not want to deceive the people. He wanted them to know what was going on outside and let them participate. This would give rise to a sense of ownership, and in the future, it would be twice the result with half the effort. The notice was written clearly enough, and as expected, it attracted all kinds of discussion among the people. So it was Bugnam of Gojosian who came. "I heard that he loves the people very much, especially us Han people. Seems that there is no need to worry." Yes, Bugnam of Gojosian treats the people well. With him around, of course we are safe. But it says that Baiming is attacking Bugnam of Gojosian's forces in the grasslands? What does this mean? Isn't Bugnam of Gojosian our great Ming dynasty's Bugnam of Gojosian? An honest-looking man in his 40s scratched his head as he spoke with a confused look on his face. In fact, it was not only this middle-aged man. Many people had the same expression. They lived in the Shuangqing Guard Central City all year round, and because the transportation was not developed, they did not know much about what was going on outside. Fortunately, there were some knowledgeable people in the crowd. They had traveled extensively, so they knew a bit more. Facing this question, they gave an explanation. "What do you know? Some of the territories in the grasslands did not originally belong to our great Ming dynasty. That was the world of the Mongol cavalry. Their horses are like the wind and their people are like ghosts. Wherever they go, they eat people without spitting out their bones. They are still nomads, and other than raising some livestock, they don't know how to do anything else. They don't even have any iron tools. In order to survive, they have set their sights on us, the Han people. They would often rob the Han people stationed there. Other than robbing things, sometimes they would even rob people. That is very abominable." This brother is right. Those Mongol cavalry are very vicious, especially in the recent years. Our great Ming dynasty has allowed them to do whatever they want, causing them to not know how to restrain themselves. Their actions have become even more vicious. I was also fortunate enough to go to the grasslands. I heard that it was because of the appearance of Bugnam of Gojosian that those Mongol cavalry were defeated. Many grassland tribes were cleaned up because of this, and some were even destroyed. Yes, I went to the Jianzhou Left Guard Central City a while ago. I heard from a friend there that there is a very magnificent city in the grasslands. There are countless Han people there and they live very comfortably. That was built by Bugnam of Gojosian. That friend also said that since Bugnam of Gojosian was in the grasslands, the safety of the Han people was guaranteed. Who knows how many people there have worshipped Bugnam of Gojosian in their homes, saying that they are thanking him. The few people spoke one after another and quickly told the story to everyone. Most of the Han people who did not know all of this before now knew that Bugnam of Gojosian was actually so powerful. However, a problem appeared. An old scholar who was literate but had never traveled far asked with a puzzled expression, "Since Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful in the grasslands and has done so many things for our Han people, why is the Baiming imperial court looking for trouble with him?" Chapter 1136. Seeing that it was the old scholar who spoke, someone at the side laughed. As expected of a scholar. "Don't tell me you think that everyone in the world is a good person just because the books are all good people. Don't you know the phrase, 'A great achievement alters the emperor'?" That's right. Bugnam of Gojoseon is so powerful and powerful. How could he not alert the emperor? It's normal for him to take action to suppress them. Haven't all emperors been the same since ancient times? It's a pity that they chose Bugnam of Gojoseon to fight against the Japanese Empire. That's not right. No matter what, Bugnam of Gojoseon took care of the Japanese Empire for the good of the people. Xianxia wasn't very far from the sea. They were lucky enough to see the appearance of the Japanese bandits a few times. Although the Japanese didn't dare to really attack Baiming with their military strength at that time, they could still attack the periphery. After all, their navy was stronger than Baiming. It could be said that many of the people of Xianxia had suffered losses at the hands of the pirates. Now that they heard that Bugnam of Gojoseon had completely taken care of them, how could they not be happy? Discussions rose and fell like this. Some things that they did not know before were explained by everyone. Most of the people now understood. They also knew that Bugnam of Gojoseon sent out his troops because he was bullied. Furthermore, Bugnam of Gojoseon treated the Han people very well. After a round of discussion, they finally came to a conclusion. First, there was no need to panic. As long as they did not do anything extreme, Bugnam of Gojoseon would not do anything to them. Second, Bugnam of Gojoseon was in urgent need of labor. If anyone had the idea, they could give it a try. Even if they did not get paid in the end, they would only have wasted a day's effort. It was not a big loss. The people did not necessarily know right from wrong. Their knowledge was limited, and they did not care as much about the ownership of the imperial power as those who benefited from it. Just like what the commoners often said, no matter who became the emperor, they would still be them. There would not be any changes. Not to mention a border city like the Twin Cities Guard. It was impossible for the emperor to come here in his lifetime. He had never even seen it, so how could he talk about feelings? What the commoners really cared about was the benefits that they could obtain. Since the 5-star Army's notice said that as long as they worked for them, they would be able to receive money and the remuneration was so high, why not give it a try? Some of the commoners thought so, but others shook their heads and walked away. Since ancient times, it was impossible to take advantage of the royal family while working for them. Not to mention 1 tael of silver a day, even if it was 2 maces of silver a day, it would still be impossible. Would those officials and soldiers be so kind? Slowly the crowd dispersed. Most of them were returning home and only a few of them were heading towards the barracks. All of this fell into the eyes of Long Wei, who was observing everything from afar. When Long Wei saw it, the matter naturally reached Yang Qindong's ears, and he laughed heartily in response. Good, it's done. As long as one commoner is willing to try, there won't be any problems. Shang Yang's reform had gained the trust of the commoners by standing on a tree as a sign. Now, without standing on a tree as a sign, the commoners were willing to give it a try. How could it not work? Once they returned home with the silver, presumably the city would explode. Considering that the Twin Cities Guard was too small, Yang Qindong did not arrange for people to guide public opinion. If a stranger suddenly appeared, not only would their words not be believed, but it would also arouse everyone's vigilance. As a result, he let things develop naturally. Even if no one believed what the notice said, he would still use the method of standing on a tree as a sign to gain everyone's trust. Now it seemed that there were still some daring people who were willing to try. There was no reason for the matter to not work. This was also the reason why Yang Qindong had set the reward so high. It must be known that in a place like the Twin Cities Guard, 1 tael of silver could do a lot of things. Striking while the iron was hot and letting the commoners drink with the golden and silver cups, Yang Qindong said to Long Wei Badaojiang, "Pass down the order. The soldiers who don't need to be trained will enter the homes of the commoners in the city and chop firewood and water for them. If they can do anything, inform Beta Persei to get some food for them." It was now the 3rd month of spring. In the south it was already spring and flowers were blooming, But in the north, especially in the Liaodong region, the weather was still very cold. At night, it was common for the temperature to be 10 degrees below zero. From time to time, there would be heavy snow, as if to tell the commoners that winter was not completely over. For example, at noon today it snowed. Although it was not very heavy, the streets and the courtyards of the commoners' homes were still covered with a layer of white. This gave the five-star army a chance to show off. For a time their figures were everywhere in the city. In the commoners' courtyards, the snow on the streets of the city was quickly swept away, revealing the originally black ground. At night, the commoners who had worked hard for most of the day walked out of the barracks with smiles on their faces. They did not show the slightest bit of exhaustion from working hard for the day. After working for most of the day, many of them had less than one tael of silver in their hands. This was because they did not work for a day. If they went early in the morning, they would definitely be able to earn one tael of silver. More importantly, working in the barracks, they were even provided with lunch. Although it was not very nutritious, just being able to fill their stomachs was enough. This already made them very satisfied. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was like New Year's. These commoners who had received benefits had already decided that they would go to the barracks to work tomorrow morning. Not only that, they would also call their friends to go with them. Everyone should earn money together. Just like this, when these people returned home, the city became lively again. When the white taels of silver were placed in front of everyone, their previous disbelief was swept away. Some people even regretted that they did not give it a try today. Of course, most of them had already decided that they would go to the barracks tomorrow morning. Not to mention one tael of silver a day, even half a tael a day was an extremely good thing. Since ancient times there had been many ways to buy people's hearts, but there were not many that were as simple and straightforward as Yang Qindong's. History had already proven that as long as you were good to the commoners, they would recognize you. It was not impossible for them to even work for you. Just like now, the soldiers worked for the commoners and the commoners worked for the barracks. In turn, they also received money. Who would object? The twin city guards, who had originally been somewhat nervous because of the city being occupied, quickly calmed down. Not only did they restore their previous order, but everyone was still beaming with joy. They were not affected at all by the fact that winter had not yet left and the weather was still cold. Their smiles seemed to be able to melt the snow. Taking down the twin city guards was only the first step in Yang Qindong's military operation to occupy the entire Liaodong region. Next, his gaze fell on the Yima River guards in the northeast. It was still the same. Song Yong took the lead and came at night. As long as the city gate was opened, everything would be much simpler. All of this was thanks to the Great Ming's official hierarchy. In front of a superior, a lower official generally did not have any authority to speak. As the commander of 50,000 naval troops, Song Yong's position in the military was not low. At least in the entire Liaodong region, there were very few people who could be higher than him. With him going out to open the city gate, it was always successful. The army was at the front, followed by 30,000 North Korean soldiers. Behind them, the commoners of Twin City drove carriages and were responsible for logistics. This reduced the pressure on the army, allowing them to fight forward wholeheartedly. They did not have to think about other things at all. Naturally, they were able to do things with twice the result with half the effort. Yang Qindong's plan went very smoothly. The new army Suhi did not hold them back. As soon as they appeared, they quickly took down the defenseless Ajulan guards and Tunhe guards. Then they went straight for the Fuyu guards. There was no such thing as an airtight pants. Although the new army's movements were very fast because of the heavy snow, the warhorses could not display their usual strength. In the end, a portion of the enemy managed to escape. Then the news spread. The nearby guards finally knew that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region. When the commander of the Jianzhou Left Guards, Qin Dula, received the news that the five-star army had appeared in the Liaodong region, he turned pale with fright. This was a sudden situation that he did not expect at all. He ordered people to ask for help from the Beiming imperial court while he began to prepare his troops for war. The former Jianzhou Left Guards had been taught a good lesson by Yang Qindong. The former commander Zhou Xian and the former commander Tang Longtian had both died at the hands of the five-star army. Naturally, he who had suffered a loss before was cautious and prepared for battle. He knew the valiant fighting strength of the five-star army and had seen it more than once. Qin Dula still had lingering fear in his heart. He was even considering whether or not it was better to directly defend the city. However, the newly appointed commander Tong Long did not think this way. Just by hearing his name, Tong Long knew that he was not a Han person. Instead, he was a combination of the Nuzan clan and Han people. Because of his bloodline, he had shown that he was good at fighting since he was young. After he grew up, he worked hard to perform well. In addition to his family's support, he finally obtained the position of Commander Tong Long. This was a secondary grade 3 military official. Furthermore, Tong Long was still young, not even 30 years old. It could be said that his future was limitless. However, the bad thing was that the position of an official in the Great Ming Dynasty depended on seniority. So what if you were capable? Being young was your biggest weakness. Unless you could make a great contribution, you would have to wait if you wanted to be promoted. Some people could even wait for a few years, a decade, or a lifetime. Of course, the young Tong Long did not want to wait any longer. He urgently needed to prove himself. Originally, he was thinking about whether or not he should sign up for the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. After all, that army was now unhindered in the grassland. It was said that even the powerful 5-star army was suppressed in the first city and did not dare to move. An army like this was the place where hot-blooded soldiers like him could realize their ambitions. However, before he could make any decision, the 5-star army actually appeared in the Liaodong region. Chapter 1137. According to the official information, the 5-star army should be at war with the Japanese Empire right now. Why would they appear here? It was a little puzzling. However, Tong Long didn't care that much. He only knew that his opportunity to perform had arrived. After receiving the news, Tong Long first went to look for Commander Qin Dula and took the initiative to ask for a battle. Unfortunately, he was directly rejected. The reason given by Qin Dula was that it wasn't the right time to send troops because they couldn't figure out the actual situation of the 5-star army. Tong Long walked out of Qin Dula's mansion with an unhappy expression and went home angrily. The Tong family's status in the Nuzan tribe was very high. In a place like the Jianzhou Left Guard, there was basically nothing that they couldn't do once they wanted to do something. Tong Long used the reason that Qin Dula wanted to suppress him and didn't want him to be promoted as an excuse to ask his family to step forward and put pressure on him. The commander didn't know about this. He was still looking at the map in his study room and worrying. Honestly speaking, Qin Dula really didn't have the intention to suppress Tong Long. Stopping him from sending troops was really for Tong Long's sake. He had dealt with the 5-star army before and knew how powerful they were. He still remembered how overbearing the 5-star army was when they wanted to open up a transportation route from here. The army was waiting outside for the nearby guards to attack. But no matter who went, didn't they not gain the slightest advantage? Such a powerful opponent wasn't someone that could be easily defeated. Without absolute confidence, it was best to bide one's time and preserve one's strength. The kind-hearted Qin Dula wanted to preserve his strength. However, the Tong family's strength was really too great. In the afternoon, the influential people in the city came one after another to put pressure on him. These people had a certain amount of prestige in the city. If it was only one or two of them, he wouldn't be afraid. However, with so many of them coming together, even the commander couldn't handle it. He had no choice but to agree to Tong Long's request to send troops. However, he stated that he could only bring 2,000 troops and wanted to test the opponent's strength first. Commander Qin Dula only gave 2,000 cavalrymen, but Tong Long didn't think much of it. In his opinion, quality was more important than quantity. Therefore, he gladly accepted it. He also used his family's connections to find the men of the Nuzan tribe and gathered another 1,000 men. He even gave them war horses. In this way, 3,000 cavalrymen was already a strong force. After preparing for a day with 3,000 cavalrymen, Tong Long left Jian Province's left guard city on the third day and headed north. He wanted to find the 5-star army and give them a head-on blow. He wanted to let them know that there was still a fierce general like him in Liaodong. The last few times the 5-star army appeared here, Tong Long wasn't there. Instead, he was sent by his family to Beiming to study Confucianism. The Nuzan tribe had good foresight. They knew what it meant to learn from others' strengths to make up for their weaknesses. They also knew what it meant to do as the Romans did. If they wanted to live more comfortably under the rule of the Great Ming Dynasty and have more power, they had to learn what they liked. It was precisely because he wasn't in Liaodong at that time that all the things about the five-star army were just legends. As the saying goes, seeing is believing. Naturally, Tong Long wasn't afraid of anyone. What he didn't know was that from the moment he walked out of Jian province's left guard city with 3,000 cavalrymen, his every move was under the eyes of the 1st Cavalry Division. After Tian Hu received the order from Yang Chendong, he immediately sent out scouts to watch every Baiming guard city in this area. For a big city like Jian province's left guard city, its geographical location was so crucial and important. Of course they wouldn't miss it. There were more than 10 scouts outside the city. They were responsible for watching the 4 city gates. Once they made a move, they could immediately report it to the division headquarters. When Tong Long came out with 3,000 cavalrymen, such a mighty formation naturally couldn't escape the eyes of those who were observant. The news was quickly sent to the division commander, Tian Hu. At the foot of an unknown mountain, the division headquarters of the 1st Cavalry Division was built here. What was different from the past was that this time, the mission they received was to stop the enemy. This required them to remain still. Only when they saw the enemy move out would they be able to go out and fight. Therefore, the world's 1st Cavalry Division, which had always been roaming around, had built a temporary division headquarters. It was rare for them to rest and also be used for command. When the news came that 3,000 Baiming cavalrymen had walked out of Jian province's left guard city, Tian Hu came to the prepared sand table and asked the division headquarters staff officer, "Which regiment is the closest to Jian province's left guard city?" "Division commander, the 4th regiment is stationed nearby." The staff officer, who knew the division's situation like the back of his hand, gave the answer immediately. When Tian Hu heard this, he nodded his head in satisfaction and ordered, "Give the order to Commander Bai Shuang of the 4th regiment. Tell him to take down this cavalry and make the formation bigger. Let the other guards see that our 5-star army is not to be trifled with." Bai Shuang, who was born in the Baiming capital's Yang Family Academy, was one of Yang Chendong's favorite students. He was chosen by Yang Chendong because of his proficiency in both civil and martial arts. After a period of training in the army, he was transferred to the 1st Cavalry Division as the commander of the 4th Regiment. Although he was Yang Chendong's student, he was still too young. Many people didn't understand why he was appointed. There were many battle sequences in the 5-star army. If it was just for promotion, then he could have gone to any army. Why did he have to go to the world's 1st Cavalry Division? One had to know that this was the cavalry that could fight the best. They could go to the front lines at any time and fight the enemy with their lives. In this kind of army, if one didn't have real strength, relying on one's background wouldn't work. Bai Shuang still came and became the commander. At that time, many people didn't think well of this matter. However, when he started to carry out his duties as the commander, Bai Shuang's performance blinded many people. Not only did he perfectly complete the tasks given by the division headquarters in every battle, but he also did it at a very small cost. Just like that, the 4th Regiment commander Bai Shuang was accepted by everyone and became the backbone of the 1st Cavalry Division. Now that the 1st Cavalry Division's first battle in the Liaodong region was handed over to Bai Shuang, who was proficient in both civil and martial arts, Tian Hu was completely at ease. Now he just had to wait for the other party to report back. Soon the order was sent to Bai Shuang through the scouts. When he saw the military order, he immediately ordered the 4th Regiment to gather. At the same time, he sent out scouts to find out the movements of the 3,000 enemy cavalry and the situation of the commander. Yang Chendong had said more than once that only by knowing yourself and the enemy could you fight every battle well. He also said that the commander of an army was extremely important. He often represented the character and fighting strength of an army. If done well, a fierce tiger leading a group of mountain goats could even defeat a group of tigers led by a mountain goat. Tactically, the enemy was valued. Strategically, the enemy was despised. It was about making all the necessary preparations before a battle. Even if the battle was a battle that one was completely confident in, one must still make all the necessary preparations. Only in this way could one achieve the goal of winning every battle and obtain the greatest victory with the smallest cost. Bai Shuang, who admired Yang Chendong very much, naturally regarded these words as the truth. In fact, he had always done this. Before every battle, he would do his best to understand the situation of the opponent. He would understand the opponent's identity, background, and personal strength, including their strengths and weaknesses, etc. It was because of this that he was able to quickly gain the recognition of everyone and become the commander of the 4th Regiment, commander of the 1st Cavalry Division. Fortunately, Xianxia's intelligence network was very complete. They had done detailed investigations on all the famous people. Therefore it was not difficult to understand them. Just like when Tong Long led his troops out of the city, some of his information was also sent to Bai Shuang. The scouts who rushed back from the front sent over the information regarding Tong Long. There were a total of 3 pages, so Bai Shuang had a better understanding of his opponent. I didn't expect him to be such a talent. Not only is his strength extraordinary, but he also obtained good results when he was studying in the capital of Baiming. There are actually so many people who admire him. After reading Tong Long's information, Bai Shuang could not help but sigh. The introduction in the information was very detailed. Because of this, Bai Shuang felt a sense of admiration. It would be a waste if such a talent was not only used by his teacher. Didn't Yang Chendong always say that it was easy to obtain 1,000 soldiers, but difficult to find a general? Now that such a suitable person had appeared in front of him, if he did not capture him alive, wouldn't it be a waste? Men, bring me the map. After Bai Shuang had a plan, he made a decision in his heart. Tong Long did not know anything about his situation. As the opponent, the 5-star army had already grasped everything. He was currently leading 3,000 cavalrymen and galloping around. He wanted to find the main force of the 5-star army and then have a decisive battle with them. No one knew the strength of these 3,000 people better than him. Not to mention the 2,000 cavalrymen given by Commander Chendula. Their general strength was not bad. For example, the 1,000 Nuzan cavalrymen that were summoned in the end. Which one of them was not proficient in riding a horse? An army like this should be qualified to join the Liaodong Iron Cavalry. Right now they were only fighting against the 5-star army. He really could not think of any possibility of failure. This was the most elite of the Nuzan cavalrymen. Riding on a tall horse, he continuously galloped for 4 hours. Only when the war horse was a bit tired did he stop and let everyone rest for a while. But what he didn't expect was that just as he stopped and didn't give the order to rest, a group of black crows suddenly appeared on the hillside in front of him. Then a group of 5-star soldiers also appeared in his line of sight. "Look, is that the 5-star army's cavalry?" A sharp-eyed person shouted. "It seems that they don't have a lot of people. It seems that there are only 300 to 400 of them." An experienced veteran directly shouted out the number of the enemy's forces. Chapter 1138. There was no doubt that the 5-star army was a 5-star army, and they only had 300 to 400 soldiers. At this moment, how could Tong Long be courteous? Joy flashed across his eyes and he shouted loudly, "Brothers, our chance to make a contribution is here. Charge with me." Charge. The 3,000 cavalry shouted at the same time. Their momentum was extremely shocking. When the iron hooves stomped on the ground, the earth trembled. The 3,000 cavalrymen that rushed over attracted the attention of the hundreds of 5-star soldiers that appeared on the hillside. When they saw the enemy charging over menacingly, they only hesitated for a few breaths before turning around and fleeing. It was obvious that they could see that the strength of both sides was not equal. Under such circumstances, it was not a wise decision to fight. Just like this, one side ran in front while the other chased from behind. The two sides chased after each other. One side desperately tried to escape from the misfortune of being caught while the other desperately tried to make a contribution. On this piece of land, more than 6 hours had passed as they chased after each other. The sky gradually darkened. The 3,000 cavalry from Liaodong were tired after running for an entire day. Seeing that the distance between them and the enemy hadn't closed by a bit, many people advised Tong Long to rest. The general idea was that since they couldn't catch up, it was better to have a good rest. Their brothers were too tired. Although Tong Long really wanted to establish this merit, he was also clear that it would be very difficult to achieve his goal by chasing after them like this. Although he was a bit unhappy, his rationality won over his emotions. In the end, he gave the order for the army to rest. However, he didn't give up and arranged for a few dozen scouts to continue the chase. He believed that if he was tired, the 5-star army wouldn't be any better. This idea was not wrong. When Tong Long and the others had just rested for less than an hour, the scouts rushed back and said that the 5-star corps that they were chasing had stopped after seeing that there was no one chasing after them. They were resting on the main road that was 10 miles ahead. They really are tired. Hearing the scouts' report, Tong Long immediately became spirited. He immediately ordered everyone to stop resting and chase after the enemy. They had only rested for a short period of time. Many people only had the opportunity to drink some water and eat some dry rations. They hadn't officially rested yet. However, no one dared to disobey Tong Long's orders. All of them fell into the trap and continued on their way under the guidance of the scouts. After running for 5 kilometers, they saw a wide, flat road in front of them. Several hundred 5-star army soldiers were resting. It was a pity that their appearance had the effect of startling the enemy. When the two sides were still 4 miles apart, the 5-star army began to flee once again. Chase. Tong Long didn't want to give up just like that, so he continued to spur his horse. Just like that, after a day of rushing, the chase continued for an entire night. Both sides didn't stop to rest, but as a result their spirits dropped quite a bit. The sky began to brighten and the 5-star army could be seen more clearly. However, they were still 4 li away and it was truly hopeless. General, let's take a break. If we continue to chase like this, I'm afraid we'll never be able to catch up. One of the Baihu who sensed that his warhorse's fur was soaked through couldn't help but speak up. With someone taking the lead, very quickly more and more voices echoed out. Tong Long, who knew that the law couldn't punish too many people, hesitated for a moment. He was prepared to give the order to stop the chase and take a good rest. However, at this moment another Baihu suddenly shouted, "Look, their speed seems to have slowed down. It seems like they can't hold on any longer." Is that so? It seems like it. Yes, I can see it too. Their speed seems to have slowed down quite a bit. Compared to our riding skills, it seems like they're still lacking. At this moment all sorts of discussions began to spread. This was equivalent to giving Tong Long a shot of confidence. He immediately laughed and said, "Good, victory is right in front of us. We can't give up. Now is the time to compete with our willpower. Whoever can persevere the most, victory will belong to them. Everyone charge with me." Another chase began. Just as everyone wished, the distance between the two sides increased from 4 li to 3 li. At the closest point it was almost 2 li. If it wasn't for the fact that the 5-star army knew that once they were caught, they would definitely be dead, and had unleashed their potential several times to increase their speed, they would have been caught by now. After a day and a night, it was another day. It wasn't until the afternoon when the sun was about to set that the chasing group arrived at the side of a large mountain. At this point, no matter if they were running or chasing, they had all given it their all. If it wasn't for that trace of willpower still causing trouble, everyone would have stopped long ago. Even so, half of the 3,000 Liaodong cavalrymen had already slowed down. Some of them were even swaying on their horses. It seemed like they would fall asleep as soon as the order to rest was given. Talk, talk, talk. Talk, talk, talk. Under the setting sun, the sound of armored horses galloping could be heard from the quiet mountain, causing snowflakes to fall from the branches of the trees on the mountain. When Tong Long saw all of this, he turned pale with fright. This kind of sound, this kind of effect, it must be a new cavalry group. If it was his allies, then it would be fine. But if it was the 5-star army, then they would really be in danger. If there were more of them, then these 3,000 people would be thrown here. Sometimes, the more one was afraid of something, the more likely it would happen. Just as Tong Long placed his hopes on the sudden arrival of the cavalry, the bright red flag of the 5-star army appeared. There were at least 1,000 of them, and they were neat and orderly in formation. With one look, one could tell that they were an iron army that had been honing their strength for a long time. Needless to say, they were the soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division's 4th Regiment. Even the 400 cavalrymen that had been running before were part of them. When they saw the main force arrive, the 5th Battalion commander who was in charge of luring the enemy chuckled. He stood at attention at the front of the group and said, "Reporting to Regiment Commander, the 5th Battalion successfully completed the mission of sneaking away from the enemy." They said sneaking away from the enemy and not luring them. This in itself already showed that they did it on purpose. Very good, the 5th Battalion will record this merit. Now go and rest. Leave everything to the other 4 battalions. Bai Shuang said happily. No, please approve. Our 5th Battalion can still fight. Even if our combat strength is weaker, we still have the stamina to capture prisoners. The 5th Battalion commander chuckled and requested to participate in the battle. Approved. You guys will be in charge of the periphery. Clean up the battlefield later. Bai Shuang also laughed out loud as he spoke. Then he turned around and gave the order. The 4 battalions behind him formed an arrow formation. If everyone was full of energy, Tong Long would still have some confidence in fighting against 2,000 with 3,000. But now they were exhausted. After running for 2 days and 1 night, they did not even have 2 hours of rest. At this moment, they were afraid that they could not even use 20% of their usual strength. How could they talk about winning the battle? The appearance of the 5-star army caused Tong Long's expression to change drastically. The cavalrymen behind him were all panting with ugly expressions. Get ready, charge. Bai Shuang didn't give them any time to rest. Perhaps this was originally an unfair battle, but this was the result of his plan. It must be said that it was also a part of his strength. If he had to blame someone, he could only blame Tong Long for being too greedy. He always wanted to gain merit. The 4 battalions, totaling 1,600 cavalrymen of the 1st Cavalry Division, charged forward. They were either wielding a saber in one hand and a shield in the other, or wielding a saber in both hands. Just like this, with unstoppable momentum, they charged toward the enemy. By the time they formed several dozen arrow-tipped formations and fiercely pierced into the 3,000 Liaodong cavalry, victory or defeat was already decided. Even if they were in their peak condition, they wouldn't be able to gain any advantage. Now that their strength was less than 20%, how could they fight this battle? Facing the charge of the 1st Cavalry Division, a lot of people wanted to raise their blades to meet them. They could even see the direction of the blades clearly. But because of their lack of strength, they were able to display their weak side in a head-on clash. Some of these cavalrymen who should have been able to fight for a few rounds were knocked off their horses. Some of them fought for 2 rounds, but they were also knocked to the ground because of their lack of strength. Tong Long was worthy of being called a valiant general. Even if he didn't sleep for 2 days and 1 night, and didn't even have a good drink of water when he really faced the enemy, he still showed his valiant side. Even when he was surrounded by 4 soldiers of the 1st Cavalry Division, he was still able to fight evenly. Tong Long's performance was seen by Bai Shuang. He couldn't help but nod his head. It was rare for the Baiming army to have such a tough general, so he didn't have any plans to give up. This kind of talent must be used by the 6th young master. Get out of the way. I'll fight him. Bai Shuang was itching to fight. Most importantly, he was afraid that his soldiers would really hurt Tong Long, so he personally rode over and stood in front of Tong Long. At this moment, Tong Long was panting heavily. Although he didn't lose in the battle just now, he was actually just using up his strength. He couldn't hold on for long. But his pride still made him persevere. Even when facing Bai Shuang, who was also extraordinary, he didn't show any fear. Who are you? Tell me your name. I don't kill nameless generals. Bai Shuang, who was wearing a black cloak, didn't immediately answer Tong Long's question. Instead, he first looked him up and down, then nodded slightly. Not bad. You have a good temperament. Teacher should like you. This kind of question and answer angered Tong Long. He was an existence that could call the wind and summon the rain in the Jian province left guard. Who would dare to look at him like this? It was as if they were admiring an object. This also made him very angry as he said, "Who are you? Tell me your name and I will not kill you." Chapter 1139. Alright, my name is Bai Shuang. I am the commander of the 4th Regiment of the 1st Cavalry Division. If you surrender now, you can still live. Otherwise, I'm afraid that this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. Bai Shuang did as the other party wished and reported his name. Then he looked at the other party with interest. If this person surrendered now, although he could still live, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Tong Long, who was already somewhat exhausted, would naturally not be frightened by Bai Shuang's words. His expression was cold as he said, "Stop talking nonsense. How can a man surrender to others? If you have the ability, then kill me. If you don't, then be killed by me. Take this." Tong Long knew that his stamina could not hold on for much longer. If he did not make a move now, the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. After knowing Bai Shuang's name, he immediately made his move. Tong Long was using an extremely sharp saber that looked a little like the weapon used by the Mongolian cavalry when they were roaming the world. It was polished until it shone brightly. When he swung it in the air because it was fast enough, it actually brought about streaks of white saber intent, gaining the upper hand by a show of strength. Just now, Tong Long had used this kind of fearless blade aura to force the 4 elite soldiers of the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division to be unable to gain the slightest advantage. Bai Shuang used a red cherry blossom spear that was about 2 meters long. The spear technique was passed down from a spear master. After his own research and continuous training, it finally became a unique technique. The spear technique was strong and heavy but also slightly agile and tricky. With this set of skills, it was difficult to find an opponent in the entire division. Only the division commander Tian who could defeat him with the full strength of his twin blades. In weapons there was a saying that the longer the weapon the stronger the weapon and the shorter the weapon the more dangerous it was. If Tong Long was at his peak he would be able to exchange dozens of blows with Bai Shuang. It would be difficult to determine the victor. However, right now he had used up 80% of his strength. How could he be a match for Bai Shuang who was using his full strength? After exchanging 2 blows, the scimitar fell to the ground. The third blow, the long spear smacked Tong Long's back, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and fall to the ground. Tong Long fell to the ground and fainted. Immediately, other soldiers came forward and tied him up tightly. Looking at the opponent that he had knocked out, Bai Shuang nodded lightly. Even though they had only exchanged 2 moves, he could still feel that his opponent's strength was not ordinary and his moves were sharp. Call the medics over and take a good look at him. We can't let anything happen to him. When Bai Shuang knocked Tong Long to the ground and looked up at the battlefield, the battle was basically over. Apart from a few people who were still resisting, most of the Liaodong cavalry had fallen off their horses. Some had even knelt down and surrendered. It wasn't that he didn't want to fight but that he couldn't. Under the conditions of hunger and cold, it was already not easy to ride a horse. If they wanted to fight with a sword, especially when facing a strong opponent, they would not have a good ending. Those who did not want to die simply chose to surrender. 2,000 people against 3,000 people and only a few dozen of them were injured. None of them died. Looking at the opponent, almost 100 of them were killed and the rest were all captured. Not a single one escaped. Even their general was captured. This was definitely a great victory. Commander, although the opponent this time is strong, if we fight them head-on, we won't be afraid of them. We will definitely win. Seeing that the situation was settled, the commander of the 1st Battalion came in front of Bai Shuang and said unhappily, "What? Do you feel that winning like this isn't fair enough? Let me tell you, on the battlefield, as long as you can defeat your opponent, it's fine. As for what method to use, it depends on the benevolent and the wise. If it's possible, it's best to win without fighting. Do you understand?" "No." The commander of the 1st Battalion, who was about to refute, suddenly heard Bai Shuang say, "That's right, what I said just now was taught to me by my teacher." Well said. Once he heard that it was Yang Chendong who said it, the commander of the 1st Battalion did not dare to refute. The commander of the 1st Battalion could still give some opinions to the commander, but in front of Yang Chendong, the creator of Xianxia, who was like a god of war, he did not have the slightest intention to refute. He knew that the commander of the 1st Battalion would have such a reaction. Bai Shuang laughed in his heart and waved his hand. "Clean up the battlefield well. Take away everything that can be used. Don't leave anything behind." Just like that, Tong Long was captured. Tian, who purposely got someone to spread the news after he found out about the outcome, as if to shock everyone. In an instant, the nearby city guards all knew about it. When they heard that even a fierce general like Tong Long was taken care of by the 5-star army, and that not a single one of the 3,000 cavalry came back to report, everyone was terrified of the 5-star army. The people who originally wanted to send out troops to try their luck all stopped moving and stayed in their own cities like cowards. In this period of time, the news of the 5-star army entering Liaodong had been sent to the northern Ming capital in the form of an urgent dispatch. They had just taken down the 2 cities of Shajing and Jingzhou and were thinking of expanding their gains and uprooting Yang Chendong's forces in the grasslands. Suddenly, this news was sent to the imperial court and immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Even Emperor Zhu was confused. What's going on? Shouldn't Bugnam of Gojoseon be fighting with great General Ashikaga Yoshimasa in the Japanese Empire? For this reason he had sent Song Yong and 50,000 naval troops to help. How long had it been since the battle ended? How did Bugnam of Gojoseon appear in Liaodong? What's going on? And what about the 50,000 naval troops he had sent out? Where were they now? Why was there no news of them? Could it be that they had been destroyed by Bugnam of Gojoseon? That was 50,000 people and they were at sea. It wasn't that easy to wipe them all out. Why wasn't there a single warship that reported the news? Countless questions appeared in Zhu Qiu's mind. This unexpected situation disrupted Zhu Qiu's plans. Because Shajing and Jingzhou had been peacefully taken back and he had obtained the 5-star army, Zhu Qiu was filled with confidence. Who said that Bugnam of Gojoseon was invincible? Didn't he win? Since that was the case, of course he would continue to work hard to take down Shur City and uproot the 5-star army's forces in the grassland. This idea was quickly approved by the other king of the grassland, Yeshen. On the grassland, Yeshen was really afraid of the 5-star army. At least, every battle ended with his defeat. If he could destroy the 5-star army and replace it with Baiming, it would be great. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could still be a king. Therefore, Zhu Qiu didn't have to spend much effort to reach an alliance with Yeshen. The two sides agreed that one side would send out 400,000 troops, and the other side would send out 200,000 troops. They would definitely take down Shur City with high walls and drive Xianxia's forces out of this area. Both sides were mobilizing their troops. After all, it involved an army of 600,000. Just the preparation of food and drink would take some time, not to mention the military supplies. Unexpectedly, something happened in Liaodong so quickly. If it was in the past, Zhu Qiu wouldn't panic even if Liaodong's predecessor Nurgandusi was attacked. After all, it was a bitter and cold place in his opinion. Other than being able to ensure the safety of the northern territory, it had no other use. However, it was different now. He had 70,000 Liaodong cavalrymen. They had now become the most elite existence in the Baiming army. They could even scare off the 5-star army. How could such a powerful army, the headquarters of such a powerful army, a place where countless brave warriors could be produced, how could they just watch as it was lost? He couldn't lose Liaodong and he couldn't let Yang Chendong use this opportunity to open a supply route. Zhu Qiu immediately ordered a court meeting. He wanted to gather all the officials to discuss a solution to the problem. For this court assembly, in order to achieve the effect of everyone working together, Zhu Qiu specially allowed all 4th-ranked officials and above to participate. The same went for 4th-ranked generals. In order to maintain balance in the Great Ming Dynasty, the status of the generals was usually not very high. Most of them were even regarded as boorish. Sometimes, even a 2nd-ranked general's status was not as high as a 4th-rank civil official's. Usually, during the court meeting, there were even fewer opportunities for the generals to participate. This time, Zhu Qiu intended to raise the status of the generals. From this point alone, it could be seen that Zhu Qiu was really anxious. The expansion of the court assembly this time had indeed attracted many officials to participate. Just looking down from the dragon throne, it was a sea of black crows and crows. There were more than 200 people. Looking at so many officials below the stage, Zhu Qiu smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't believe that with so many talented people he wouldn't be able to defeat a small Bugnam of Gojoseon. In his joy, Zhu Qiu looked at Jining, who was standing to the side, and nodded. The court meeting began. There was no need to talk about the topic. Those who were able to appear here naturally knew what was going on. Thus, from the beginning of the court meeting, there were officials who continuously gave suggestions. Each and every one of them spoke endlessly, as if each of them had thousands of ideas in their hearts. However, if one were to listen carefully, they would discover that most of their words were flattering Zhu Qiu and flattering her. The general idea was that although the king was strong, how could he dare to face the emperor? As long as the army marched into the Liaodong region, the so-called Wunan Wang, the so-called 5-star army, would flee as soon as they heard the news. They would surrender without a fight. At first, Zhu Qiu was in a good mood. However, the more he listened, the more he found that this wasn't the case. More than an hour had passed and no one had really come up with any ideas. They were all just saying nice things. Seeing that more and more people would have this opinion if he didn't stop them, Zhu Qiu couldn't help but cough lightly. Then he said, "Everyone, we naturally know that a small Bugnam of Gojoseon is not to be feared. However, according to your suggestions, how many people should be sent this time and who should be the commander?" When it came to the specific questions, the noisy court immediately quieted down. Chapter 1140. Most of the people who could come here were civil officials. They either relied on their writings or relied on their family's influence to get to their positions. Some even relied on some shady means to get to their positions. But no matter how they entered the court, most of them had a common characteristic, and that was that they could speak but not act. It was undeniable that Confucianism could indeed teach people to be good and change the wildness in a person's heart. There were also other benefits. But the drawbacks were equally obvious. Some things were too rule-abiding. After a long time they would become complacent. It was like moving their mouths and talking. They dared to comment on anything. Some of them even dared to criticize the emperor. But when it came to practical matters they really couldn't do it. This didn't mean that they didn't have the ability, but because when two sides fought the other side wouldn't listen to you. If there was a disagreement they would draw their swords. This wasn't something that these scholars who studied Confucianism could compare to. It was important for people to know their own limits. If they knew that they couldn't do something but still insisted on standing up, then it wasn't taking responsibility but showing off. To put it bluntly, it was no different from courting death. It was just like the Tumu Fortress incident back then. How many civil officials of northern Ming had died? Among them there were many who were truly talented. However, in the face of the ferocious Walla cavalry, were their eloquent tongues really of any use? No. After the previous incident, the imperial court was much quieter this time. For a time, Zhou Xian, who was originally full of hope, suddenly had an ugly expression. Just now, when everyone was talking so excitedly, he thought that they had already thought of a countermeasure. But now it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. His gaze swept past the civil official group and naturally landed on the military general group, which had very few people. When it came to specific matters, especially when it came to leading troops to war, it still depended on the generals. But what made Zhou Qiu a little disappointed was that even these generals who practiced martial arts didn't take the initiative to stand up at this moment. Instead, they all lowered their heads and pondered about something, as if there was something valuable under their feet that was worth attracting. The Great Ming Dynasty had a long history of valuing literature and despising the military. It wasn't something that could be changed overnight. Although because of the changes in the political situation, the status of the generals had increased, but there was still a big gap between the two sides. Let's use a simple example. What is the most important thing in a war? Some people might talk about the morale of the soldiers, some would talk about the bravery of the generals, some would talk about whether this was a battle of justice, and some would talk about the right time, the right place, the right people, and so on. But the real key was logistics. In other words, it referred to the supply of food, fodder, and weapons. Think about it, if an army that was capable of fighting did not have food to eat and only had wooden sticks in their hands, how could they fight the enemy? How could they use their teeth to bite the enemy? Tear it apart with your bare hands? Thus, there was a saying that war was a war for money. It just so happened that the logistics of the army were decided by the civil officials. This was equivalent to having one's Achilles heel pressed down. Even if one wanted to fight alone, one couldn't. How could one win a battle in such a situation? Just like the 70,000 Liaodong cavalry. Why did they develop so quickly? Why were they so elite that even the 5-star army in Origin City was afraid of them? It was nothing more than that they had enough autonomy. They could harvest grain and grass on the grassland like the Mongolian cavalry. They could snatch good things when they saw them, which made them stronger and stronger. It was impossible to send troops to Liaodong without any taboos. It could be imagined that no matter who led the troops, the logistics would be fought over. This involved a lot of benefits. Whoever had the advantage would get countless benefits from it. Once the war was won, these people would not only get the benefits but they would also get the credit. If they were defeated, it would have nothing to do with them. The responsibility would all fall on the generals who led the troops. With this comparison, it was no wonder that the generals were not willing to stand up and take the responsibility that originally belonged to them. Not to mention, the opponent of this battle was Bugnam of Gojosian. This person had the title of the god of war. How could he be so easy to deal with? The generals were all silent. Juchi was a little angry. Before he could say anything, the civil officials at the side had already launched an attack. Perhaps they also felt that the contrast between just now and now was too big. They were afraid that the emperor would vent his anger on them. Therefore they were ruthless and as unpleasant as they could be. What's wrong? Aren't you generals? Your duty is to go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. Even if you die on the battlefield, you won't hesitate. This is your destiny. That's right. Isn't it your duty to send troops to war? Why are you afraid of death now? None of you dare to accept the challenge. It's really disappointing. No wonder Bugnam of Gojosian is so arrogant. It's all because of you useless people. You useless things. You really don't know what to do. You really make people look down on you. Yes, it's too disappointing. The imperial court spent so much money to feed you. The criticism came one after another. It was as if they couldn't show their righteousness if they didn't step on them. In just a short while, the generals' faces were as red as a monkey's buttocks. Some of the more thin-skinned ones wanted to find a hole to hide in. This was really like the saying, "Those who enjoy the show are not afraid of things getting out of hand." Faced with the criticism of the entire civil officials, a general called Li Tong finally couldn't take it anymore. As a second-grade general in the imperial court, he naturally had his own personal pride. Especially now that the status of a general was rising step by step, he was very optimistic about the future. More than once he had told the other generals in private that spring was coming for the generals. But now, before he could achieve his goal, he was being slandered in such a way. He was really angry. When he saw that the other generals and colleagues were all evasive and didn't even dare to fart in front of the civil officials, he angrily stepped forward and said, "Your Majesty, this subject is willing to lead the army, but I have a request." Finally, someone was willing to take the initiative to step forward. Naturally, Zhu Xian was overjoyed. When he looked at the person, even his gaze became much friendlier. "Oh, General Li, I don't know what request you have. Why don't you tell me? I hope that the matter of the provisions will be managed by the officials I've chosen." In this way, Li Tong boldly made his request. Just as he was about to continue speaking, he didn't expect that the civil officials had already exploded. "How is this possible? This is against the rules. Then won't everything be decided by you generals? Once you have disloyal thoughts, how can you control it?" "Absolutely not. Something really happens, it will be a big matter. It will be much more dangerous than the matter in Liaodong. Yes, we absolutely can't agree." The discussion rose again, followed by a group attack. Li Tong, who wasn't good with words, was instantly drowned in a sea of verbal attacks. This time, not only would the civil officials not agree, but even Emperor Zhu Qiu wouldn't agree. As an emperor, as a monarch, how could he control his army? Wasn't it shown by eating, drinking, and defecating? If he gave the generals too much power, who knew if it would spur some people's ambitions and cause them to do something unfavorable to him? If that was the case, then he would suffer a great loss. No emperor would agree to such a dangerous matter, let alone Zhu Qiu, who had forcefully taken the throne. Perhaps it was because he didn't take the right path when he took the throne, so he was very afraid that someone would threaten him. It was even more impossible for him to agree to Li Tong's request. Shaking his head, Zhu Qiu said with an unquestionable tone, "General Li, you've heard everyone's reaction. We absolutely can't agree to this matter." Zhu Qiu's words set the tone for the matter. Li Tong knew that it was useless to say more. However, since he had already stepped out, it was impossible for him to retreat. He could only cup his hands and say, "Since it's like this, everything will be decided by your Majesty. This subject will only be responsible for leading the troops to fight." Li Tong was forced to accept the challenge. In a situation where no other generals stepped out, Zhu Qiu finally appointed him as the general leading the troops. He took 200,000 soldiers, 50,000 of which were veterans and 150,000 of which were new recruits. He ordered them to prepare within 7 days and send troops to support Liaodong. As if to ease Li Tong's heart, Zhu Qiu especially said during the court meeting that no matter who was in charge of logistics and provisions, they couldn't make things difficult for General Li and had to do their best to cooperate. The officials naturally agreed, but no one knew what would happen. Su Yozhen, the crown prince's junior tutor, grand scholar and minister of justice, didn't say anything from beginning to end. He just watched coldly from the sidelines and sneered in his heart. Before the troops had even been sent out, General Li Tong had already attracted the dissatisfaction of the civil officials. Li Tong could even imagine that it would be strange if he wasn't targeted. If he didn't do this, how could the civil officials vent their anger of being accused of not trusting him? It seemed that the result of this battle had already been decided. Sigh, could it be that the Great Ming's luck was really coming to an end? The Hu estate. Minister of Rights Hu Xiao. Although he still had the title of minister, he hadn't been to court for a while. This was because the relationship between Baiming and Bugnam of Gozhouxian had changed greatly. This made his position as Yang Qindong's father-in-law very awkward. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble and to avoid being targeted, Hu Xiao was sick and stayed at home. Not only that, but the other members of the Hu family were also ordered to stay at home and not go out. They had to be as low-key as possible. Chapter 1141. Although he had not left his room, he was still able to receive news of what had happened in the imperial court. Hu Xiao had been the Minister of Rights for many years, and his students were spread all over the world. He naturally had many sources of information. It was precisely because he knew what had happened in the imperial court that Hu Xiao, who was with his son in his study, fell into deep thought. Hu Zhongning also knew what had happened in the imperial court, and he was much more nervous than his father. Father, the emperor is about to move against Qindong. Will we be implicated? How about I go find the 5-star army in the city? There's no need for that. It's not time yet. Hu Xiao slowly opened his eyes, a faint smile on his lips. It was clear that everything was under his control. Son, don't think that we'll be in danger if we really start fighting. It's said that even when 2 armies fight, they don't kill the envoys. But father. Seeing that Hu Zhongning was about to say something, Hu Xiao waved his hand and said, relax. Since Zhu Qiu was able to become emperor, he's not so foolish. He's keenly aware that before he destroys Bugnam of Gozhouxian, he won't be able to touch us. Otherwise, he doesn't even know what the consequences will be. On the contrary, the more victories Bugnam of Gozhouxian wins on the front lines, the more apprehensive the emperor will be. Unless it's time for a life-and-death struggle, as long as we don't stir up trouble, nothing will happen. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Hu Xiao was so confident not only because of his thorough analysis of the situation and his deep understanding of Zhu Qiu's personality, but also because of 2 other reasons. First, Su Yozhen was in the imperial court. If something really did happen, he would definitely inform him. Second, Baiming had Yang Qindong's brothers and sisters in the capital. If even they were fine, how could he possibly be in danger? With these 2 reasons, Hu Xiao was naturally brimming with confidence. On the contrary, he was now worried about whether Yang Qindong could stop Baiming's army. If Yang Qindong was seriously injured or even destroyed, then as his in-laws they would be seen as accomplices. That would be the real danger. Not to mention that the Hu mansion was as calm as water. Yang Qindong, who was running amok in Liaodong, had telegraphed everything that happened there to him. Looking at the telegram sent by Wang Shan, Yang Qindong chuckled and said, 200,000? Aren't they looking down on our 5-star army too much? After a brief evaluation, Yang Qindong put it aside. Obviously, he had already predicted that Baiming would send troops, so he wasn't surprised by what he had expected. His main focus was now on the next territory to be conquered, Gulinwei. Ever since Yang Qindong brought Leng Si Shifu to the northern part of Liaodong, everything went smoothly. Besieging a city was as easy as entering an uninhabited land. In addition, the surrendered General Song Yong played a big role. Just like the previous Xishan guards, they didn't even fire a shot. Song Yong entered the city first to persuade them to surrender and occupied the city. More than 1,000 Ming soldiers and tens of thousands of Great Ming people were included in Xianxia's territory. This time, to deal with Gulinwei, Yang Qindong used the same trick. Song Yong volunteered to go first, and once they occupied the city, it was tantamount to opening the southwest gate of Nuergon Duxi's headquarters. They weren't far from their goal. Young Master Hai Si Shifu sent a telegram. They have entered Kuwu Island, Sakhalin Island in the future, along the waterway. After a fierce battle, they successfully occupied it. Beta Persei brought a telegram that he had just received to Yang Qindong's temporary tent. Good. When he heard the news, Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh heartily. Kuwu Island was occupied, which meant that Commander Song Quan had no way to retreat on the sea. He had to either fight with him or surrender. There was no third choice. As if confirming the saying, good things come in pairs, not long after, Song Yong also rushed back. Along with him was Gulinwei's Grand Qian Huzai. Obviously he had been persuaded and this time he was here to surrender. Similarly, it didn't take much effort to capture Gulinwei. Yang Qindong was one step closer to achieving his goal of capturing Liaodong. Very good, Song Yong did well. Tell him that he will be heavily rewarded. When we completely capture Tuergon Duxi's headquarters, we will definitely reward him. Yang Qindong said with a smile. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general and his ability to fight was not very good, his eloquence was not bad. He was also a talent. Yang Qindong had already thought about it. After the war he would send him to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He should be able to play a big role. After Gulinwei was taken down, the next target would be the Fushan Guards, which was the Turlanwei Guards headquarters. Once they took down this place, they would be able to directly face the highest level of power in the Liaodong region. If they could take down this place without shedding any blood, it would be perfect. Beta Persei passed the message to Song Yong. Song Yong was naturally excited. He originally thought that he was just a surrendered general and would never have the chance to raise his head in this life. He didn't expect that he would be able to enter the eyes of Bugnam of Zhou Xian. Thinking about his future, he decided to continue to make contributions. So after returning to the barracks to rest for a night, he continued to rush forward and went straight to Tuergon Duxi's headquarters. Yang Qindong led the army through Gulinwei early the next morning. At this time it was already May. The weather was getting warmer and warmer. After the snow melted, the speed of the army's advance was also a lot faster. 2 days later, Song Yong sent news that Tuergon Duxi's headquarters was already empty. Whether it was the soldiers or the people in the headquarters, they had all disappeared. They should have all gathered in Tuergon Duxi's headquarters. So Song Yong directly went to Tuergon Duxi's headquarters in the Liaodong region. Another 5 days passed. When Yang Qindong led the army to Tuergon Duxi's headquarters, bad news came. The cavalry scouts reported that Song Yong's head was hung on the city wall of Tuergon Duxi's headquarters. As soon as the news reached Yang Qindong's ears, he was shocked and furious. Although Song Yong was a surrendered general, he was now representing the 5-star army. As the saying goes, envoys should not be killed in a war. Song Yong was killed just like that. This was clearly a slap to the 5-star army's face. It was a slap to the Bugnam of Zhou Xian's face. Young master, Song Yong can't die just like that. This is clearly looking down on our 5-star army. Let's fight. Beta Persei's eyes were shining as he spoke. Along the way he originally thought that there would be a big battle to fight. This was the time to show off his skills. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Originally he thought that Tuergon Duxi would surrender. Although he would be happy he didn't go to the battlefield after all. But now Song Yong was killed. This was clearly a demonstration by the Baiming generals of Tuergon Duxi. If he didn't kill this trend, who would take the 5-star army seriously in the future? Yang Qindong didn't answer immediately. Although Song Yong's death made him very angry, he couldn't solve the problem by being impulsive. The most important thing now was to understand the situation in Tuergon Duxi. Only by understanding the other party's background would he be able to come up with the best strategy. Beta Persei, contact the intelligence personnel in Tuergon Duxi immediately. I want to know how many Baiming army there are here and who killed Song Yong. Yes, young master. Beta Persei nodded and turned to leave. Yang Qindong's eyes were cold and angry. Someone actually dared to kill one of his men, and an envoy at that. He had to admit that some people were really bold. Since that was the case, he didn't mind being ruthless and using some cruel means to tell the world what would happen if they didn't follow the rules. The intelligence department acted very quickly. Yang San, the head of the security bureau, had already arranged a lot of people here, so the situation in the city quickly spread out. According to a centurion bribed by the security bureau, Song Yong's death was caused by Zhong Qing, the commander of the city. The telegram described the whole process of Song Yong's death in detail. Originally, as an envoy, Song Yong could have left the city safely if he failed to persuade them to surrender. As the commander, Song Quan also had the same idea. Although he didn't like his own family and thought that they had no backbone, he would still abide by the rules of war between two armies. Things went bad because of Zhong Qing. He didn't know where he found out that Song Yong had 100,000 taels of silver on him. This was originally given to him by Yang Qindong. If he succeeded in persuading Song Yong to surrender, This would be their way of expressing their sincerity. Logically speaking, if they didn't reach an agreement, Song Yong should have left the city and wouldn't have handed over the 100,000 taels of silver. But the greedy Zhou Xian didn't care about this. He thought that since they were going to become enemies, it would be a waste if he didn't take the 100,000 taels. So he led the soldiers to stop Song Yong at the city gate and asked him to hand over the banknotes. Otherwise he would die. After Song Yong was chosen by Yang Chendong, his whole person changed. He had a bright future, so of course he wouldn't hand over the banknotes and show his incompetence again. Considering that he was an envoy of the 5-star army, not only did he not hand over the banknotes, he also loudly reprimanded Zhou Xian, making the soldiers at the city gate hear clearly. Being reprimanded in public like this, Zhou Xian's face naturally didn't look good. In a rage he swung his sword and chopped Song Quan. Naturally, the 100,000 taels of silver also fell into Zhou Xian's pocket. This matter was seen by many people, so Zhou Xian deliberately said that this was the fate of those who dared to surrender to the 5-star army. You're courting death. Yang Chendong's face was full of anger. He punched the sand table that was temporarily set up. With just one punch, the solid wood table was completely destroyed. Young master, calm down. This Zhou Xian really deserves to die. The intelligence department also sent news that this person's reputation in the city isn't good, especially his greed and lust. That's known by everyone. Just counting the number of concubines, he has taken as many as 13 and even gave birth to 3 fat sons for him. His eldest son is already 12 years old and is now running amok in the city. I heard that he's even worse than his father. Beta Persei also said with a face full of anger. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.